My name's Marcus, I'm 32, and for the last 10 years, I've been the unofficial safety net for my family. You know how every family has that one person? The one who bails people out when bills fall through, who lends money that never gets returned, who shows up, covers the tab, and makes sure no one ends up sleeping in their car? That's me. I never complained because, for a long time, I thought that's just what family did. You step up. You take care of each other. And growing up without much, I told myself that when I made it, I'd make sure no one else in the family had to feel that kind of struggle again. But I've come to realize something. There's a huge difference between being generous and being taken for granted. And what happened on my birthday this year made that difference painfully clear. It was supposed to be a small but meaningful celebration. Not extravagant, just intimate. People I loved, good food, a chance to catch up, laugh, and take a breather from our busy lives. I'd reserved a private room at a nice local restaurant. Nothing over the top, but classy enough to feel like an occasion. I paid in advance to hold the room, $400 non-refundable. I even picked a place close to everyone's neighborhood, so nobody could use distance as an excuse. I created a calendar invite, emailed and texted it to each family member. Mom, Dad, my older sister Kendra, her husband Tom, my younger brother Jordan, even my cousin Ray and her boyfriend, who somehow got invited to every family event despite never reciprocating. I followed up with reminders the week before, and again 2 days before, just to be sure. The day came, and I was excited. I wore the blazer my mom got me last Christmas, arrived 15 minutes early, double-checked that the staff had the cake ready, and waited. And waited. At first, I brushed it off. My family runs late. Maybe traffic. Maybe someone's kid had a last-minute diaper explosion. I ordered a drink, scrolled through my phone, and smiled at the thought of everyone eventually piling in, out of breath and full of apologies. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. Still no one. I texted the group chat. Hey, everything okay? I'm here when y'all are ready. No reply. An hour in, I felt that first pang of something ugly. Not anger, not yet, but a tight knot in my chest. Embarrassment. I looked around the room, still perfectly set, candles flickering over untouched silverware. The waiter stopped by with a polite, pitying smile and asked if I'd like to order. I told him I'd wait another 10 minutes. That's when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. I opened it, and my heart dropped. There it was. A new post from my sister Kendra. A group photo at a steakhouse. Not just her and her husband, but everyone. Everyone. Mom, Dad, Jordan, Ray, even cousin Ray's boyfriend grinning like this was the highlight of his month. The caption read, "Family night. Grateful for the real ones. #blessed. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I just stared at the screen, frozen. It didn't make sense. I scrolled through the comments. My aunt had replied, "Looks like so much fun. Missing Marcus?" And Kendra had the nerve to comment back. He had his own plans tonight, I think. My own plans. My own plans were to be sitting at this very table with them. I didn't even feel sad at first. I felt numb. Then the nausea kicked in. I didn't respond. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't call. I stood up, handed the waiter a tip that cost more than the untouched drink I'd barely sipped, and walked out of that restaurant with my hands shaking. On the drive home, my emotions shifted from confusion to humiliation, and finally to something else entirely, clarity. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a scheduling error or a miscommunication. This was deliberate. And the worst part? It wasn't even the first time something like this had happened. I thought about last Christmas, when they forgot to tell me the dinner had moved to Jordan's house. I thought about the family group chat where I always seemed to get tagged last or not at all. I thought about Kendra's bridal shower 5 years ago, how she made a speech thanking everyone but me, even though I'd paid for the damn cake and the custom decorations. I had written it all off as carelessness, as people being people. But this was intentional. This was exclusion, dressed up in steak dinners and hashtags. And I started thinking about just how much I'd done for them over the years. The $500 I sent Mom every month to cover her rent in that senior apartment complex she loved. The fact that Dad hadn't paid for his car insurance out of pocket since 2018, because I'd automated it through my own bank account when he got laid off, and said, "I'll pay you back as soon as I'm on my feet again." Spoiler alert, he never did. Kendra and Tom's wedding photographer? Me. Jordan's security deposit when he moved to Atlanta? Also me. Raise emergency dental bill? Yup, me again. I didn't keep score. I never rubbed it in. I just assumed they'd show me the same level of love and consideration when it mattered. Like, say my birthday. When I got home, I sat on the couch in the dark. I wasn't crying. I didn't even feel like I could. I just kept refreshing that post, watching the likes go up, like the world was confirming that I didn't matter to the people I prioritized most. I could have texted something snarky. I could have called and demanded answers. But instead, I did something else. I opened my banking app. The rent transfer for mom? Canceled. Her building would send her a notice in a few days. The automated payment for dad's car insurance? Gone. The policy would lapse if he didn't act fast. I went down the list. Each auto payment, each small favor, each silent, thankless transaction that had become part of my monthly routine. Canceled one by one. And then, for good measure, I posted a story on Instagram. Not petty, not dramatic. Just a photo of my untouched birthday cake with a caption that read, "Reminder, I'm the one who pays mom's rent and dad's car insurance." No hashtags, no tags, no names. But they saw it. I know they saw it because the next morning, my phone exploded. Missed calls from mom, texts from dad asking if everything is okay. Even Jordan sent a message. "Dude, Kendra said you're being dramatic. We didn't think you'd care." Kendra, of course, had the gall to write, "Wow. If you had an issue, you could have said something. No need to air dirty laundry like that." Right. I was the one airing dirty laundry. Not the people who ghosted me on my birthday for a family night I wasn't invited to. But I didn't answer. Not one of them. I left every text on read, every call to ring out. I went silent. I wasn't even sure what I wanted from them. An apology? A reason? Maybe I just wanted them to sit in the silence for once. To feel the absence of me the way I'd felt theirs. Let the utilities lapse. Let the rent notices pile up. Let them wonder if maybe, just maybe, the person they'd overlooked had finally stopped showing up. And the thing is, that was just the beginning. I didn't expect the silence to hit them so fast or so hard. By the afternoon, mom had called 4 times. The last voicemail she left was oddly chipper. "Hey honey, not sure if you got my message earlier. Just wanted to check in. I think something weird happened with the rent this month. Maybe a glitch? Anyway, love you. Call me." A glitch. Right. As if the sudden reversal of all financial help I'd been providing was some kind of bank hiccup and not a wake-up call with a siren blaring. Then dad texted, "Got a notice about the insurance. You sure you didn't forget to update the card? Looks like it's overdue. Call me when you can." Like it was a minor oversight. Like I had somehow dropped the ball, when the truth was, I'd been carrying the entire team for years. And then there was Kendra. Oh, Kendra. Her first message was short and smug. "Seriously, Marcus? You're embarrassing yourself. We didn't exclude you. We just wanted a chill dinner. You're taking it way too personally." When I didn't respond, she followed up an hour later with, "You could have just said you felt left out. You didn't need to make mom and dad freak out like this." I stared at that one for a while. What got me wasn't even the gaslighting. It was how quickly she pivoted from mocking me to blaming me for the consequences of their actions. Like I had somehow caused all this by reacting to their cruelty instead of the fact that they'd orchestrated it in the first place. It wasn't about feelings. It was about a choice. A deliberate one. They didn't forget me. They didn't think I wouldn't care. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that realization? That hurt more than I thought it would. I didn't reply to her either. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. And none of them would have fixed the root issue. They only valued me for what I could give, not for who I was. The next few days were quiet. Painfully so. No new posts from Kendra. No calls from mom. But on the 4th day, Jordan showed up at my door. Literally. I opened it, and there he was, standing on my porch like he'd just popped over to borrow a lawnmower. Hoodie, hands in pockets, sheepish grin. "Hey man," he said, like everything was fine. I leaned against the doorframe. "Didn't realize you were in town." "Yeah, I drove up," he said. "Wanted to talk. In person." I stepped aside and let him in. He walked past me like it was still his house, like we were still teenagers, like he hadn't skipped out on my birthday dinner without even a text. He sat on the couch and patted the cushion next to him. "You mad?" That question lit something in me. I didn't sit down. "Mad?" I repeated. "No." I was humiliated. There's a difference. He held up his hands. "All right, fair. But come on. You really think it was some big conspiracy? We just wanted a casual night out. Nobody was trying to hurt you." I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water just to give myself something to do, something to hold. I stared out the window for a second, then turned back to him. Jordan, I wasn't invited. He frowned. That's not true. Then why didn't anyone say anything when I sent the invites? Why did no one reply when I texted from the restaurant? Why did Kendra say I had other plans? You knew I was sitting alone in a private room, and you posted a group photo like I was a stranger. He looked away for a second, rubbed his jaw. We didn't think you'd care, man. You always seemed so. I don't know. Self-sufficient. I laughed, short, bitter. You mean because I pay for everything? Because I never ask for anything in return. He didn't say anything. Yeah, I said, nodding. That's what I thought. He looked uncomfortable. Look, Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying the rent office called. And Dad's worried about the car. Can you just, maybe give them a heads up before you do stuff like this? I walked over, slow, and set the glass down on the coffee table. I've been giving them heads ups for years, Jordan. Every month. In the form of silent support. Without complaint. Without recognition. You don't get to show up now and ask me to do it louder just because you finally noticed the silence. He stood up, frustrated now. So what? You're just going to cut them off? You think you're punishing us, but you're just making everyone's life harder. No, I said calmly. You did that. When you decided I wasn't family enough to sit at the table. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to come up with something to say that wouldn't sound defensive or stupid. He didn't find anything. I should go, he muttered. I nodded once and opened the door for him. He paused in the threshold, turned back. This feels petty, Marcus. Then maybe you've forgotten what being left out feels like. I shut the door behind him, locked it. I stood there for a few minutes, my hand still on the knob, my heart pounding, not from the argument, but from the sheer weight of finally saying it out loud. I'd spent so long biting my tongue, convincing myself to be the bigger person, telling myself I didn't need acknowledgement. But the truth was, I did. I needed to matter. Not for what I provided, but for who I was. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to apologize for expecting that. The fallout hadn't even begun. Mom was still pretending not to know what was happening. Dad was probably blaming it on expired credit cards. Kendra would go from smug to sulking the minute her next spa day got interrupted by a late payment from her Venmo request to Dad. I could already sense the storm brewing, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. It took exactly 5 days for the mask to come off. 5 days of silence. 5 days without me swooping in to fix anything, cover any bills, or smooth over the messes they'd gotten too used to ignoring. On the 6th morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Mom, not the chipper kind this time. Her voice was sharp, strained, and barely disguising the panic under the surface. Marcus, I don't know what's going on with you, but I just got a notice from the building manager. He says the rent still hasn't gone through, and if it's not resolved by Friday, they're going to start the eviction process. I don't understand. Why would you let that happen? Call me. I played the message twice. Once to hear it, and again to feel it. There was no, I'm sorry. No, we missed you. No recognition of what they'd done. Just confusion that their golden goose had stopped laying rent payments. No mention of the birthday dinner. No mention of me. Just the rent. 2 hours later, I got a similar message from Dad. His was more passive-aggressive. Hey kiddo, got a letter from the insurance company. Says the car's not covered anymore. You must have changed banks or something. Would have been nice to get a heads up. Anyway, I'm headed to the shop today, so let me know when it's fixed. When it's fixed. Not if. Not can you help. Just the assumption that I'd jump right back in once I'd made my point. Like this was all some dramatic little performance I was staging for attention. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing. A list. Every expense I'd covered over the last 3 years. Rent, car insurance, prescription refills, utilities, wedding gifts, emergency loans, surprise birthday dinners for them. Over $42,000, give or take. I wasn't planning to send it, but it felt good to see it. To know that I hadn't imagined how much I'd done. Because they clearly had. The turning point came the following Saturday. I was home, working through some emails, when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Kendra, hair done, sunglasses on, holding a tray of what looked like cupcakes store-bought, but repackaged in a decorative tin like that made it more personal. I almost didn't open the door, but some part of me wanted to see what she'd say face to face. I cracked the door open. Kendra. She gave a fake smile. Hey, thought I'd drop by. Brought cupcakes. I didn't reach for them. Why? Her smile faltered. Because it's your birthday week. Well, it was. And I know things got a little weird. I leaned against the frame. Weird. She sighed dramatically. Okay, tense. But you've kind of made it tense, Marcus. You blew up the group chat with that post. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't say anything in the chat. You know what I mean, she said, brushing past me into the living room like she owned the place. You posted that whole thing about paying mom's rent and dad's insurance, and now everyone's freaking out thinking you're cutting them off. I shut the door and turned slowly. I didn't say I was cutting anyone off. But you did, Marcus. With the rent and the insurance and everything else. It's not just the money, it's the way you did it. You didn't talk to anyone. You didn't explain. I walked past her, sat down, and finally looked her in the eye. Kendra, did you explain to me why you organized a dinner across town with everyone but me? Did you talk to me before you made that decision? She blinked. It wasn't my dinner. Ray picked the place. I laughed, a low, hollow sound. Come on. You tagged everyone. You posted the photo. You left a comment saying I had my own plans. That was your message. Don't act surprised that I finally listened to it. Her expression darkened. This is what I mean. You're being dramatic. We didn't think you'd care. You're always doing your own thing. You never ask for anything. You always act like you're better than us. I stood up. No. I act like someone who has boundaries. And you know what? I don't ask for anything because I learned a long time ago that asking doesn't work in this family unless you've got some guilt card to play. But I do show up. I pay. I support. I cover. And you know what I get in return? A seat behind the camera. A footnote in your lives. She put the tin of cupcakes on the table and crossed her arms. So what now? You want us to beg? You want an apology? I walked over, picked up the tin, and handed it back to her. No, I said. I just want honesty. If you don't consider me family, that's fine. But don't smile to my face and then pretend I disappeared on my birthday. Don't take my money and then act like my absence is no big deal. You want things back to normal? That was never normal. Her face flushed. Mom's scared she's going to lose her place. Dad's car is uninsured. You're putting them in danger over some hurt feelings. No, I said quietly. They put themselves in danger when they built their lives on someone they clearly don't respect. I'm just stepping out of the role they wrote for me without my consent. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Just stared at me, mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe I was actually standing my ground. Then, she turned, walked to the door, and paused before opening it. I hope this is worth it, she said. I hope it makes you think, I replied. And then she left. The fallout came quick after that. Mom called crying 2 days later. Not apologizing, just panicked. I don't know what we're supposed to do. They said we have until Friday, or they'll start the process. Why are you doing this, Marcus? I almost answered. Almost. But instead, I wrote something. A message I'd send once the dust settled. Once I was sure they'd finally see me for more than just what I provided. I waited a full week before sending the message. 7 days of ignored texts, missed calls, and a group chat so eerily quiet you'd think someone passed away, only they hadn't. They'd just lost their free ride, and they were starting to realize it. Mom texted me 5 times in one day, once to beg, once to guilt trip, and 3 more times to remind me she wasn't getting any younger and needed stability at her age. No mention of the birthday, no mention of the dinner, just the same cycle of expectations, only this time, with a little more panic in her tone. Dad left me a voicemail that actually made me sit down. Marcus, I don't know what happened. I know we've made mistakes. Your mother, your sister, me too. But this insurance situation is serious. If something happens and I'm not covered, please, son, don't make us pay for something Kendra did. That one hit different. Not because of the guilt trip, because of the truth in it. For once, he acknowledged that someone had done something wrong, and it wasn't me. That was new. Still, it didn't change the facts. He'd benefited just as much. He'd watched it happen, over and over again. And silence is still complicity. So I sat down, pulled up my notes, and wrote the message. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. Hi everyone. I wanted to clarify a few things since there seems to be confusion. I didn't cut anyone off. I simply stopped doing things I was never thanked for in the first place. The rent, the car insurance, the bills. I did those things because I wanted to help. But I've come to realize that my support was never appreciated, just expected. I spent my birthday sitting alone in a restaurant I paid for. No one showed. No one texted. Instead, You all had a separate dinner and posted about it like I didn't exist. That wasn't an oversight. That was a message. And I heard it loud and clear. So here's where things stand. I'm not going to pay for people who don't treat me like family. If that changes, we can talk. But until then, I'm prioritizing people who show up. For me, not just my wallet. Marcus, I sent it. No fluff. No room for misinterpretation. I even watched the little scene by icons pop up one by one in the family group chat. Kendra first, of course. Then Ray. Then Mom. Then Dad. And then the flood began. Kendra responded almost instantly. Wow. I can't believe you'd air all this in front of everyone. Way to make us all feel like garbage. I didn't reply. Mom followed up a minute later. I understand you're hurt. But don't punish everyone over one night. We love you. We've always loved you. That one stung, because it was technically true. But loving someone while constantly taking from them without care or respect, that's not love. That's ownership. Then Ray. I didn't even know it was your birthday dinner. Kendra just said you were doing your own thing. Don't drag me into this. Typical Ray. Always the first to backpedal when accountability knocks. Dad didn't respond in the chat. But a couple hours later, he sent a private message. I messed up. You've done more for this family than any of us ever acknowledged. I let your sister run the show because it was easier. I should have stepped in a long time ago. You didn't deserve what happened. If you're open to it, I'd like to sit down. Just us. That took me by surprise. I didn't answer right away. I let a few days pass. Not out of pettiness, just to see what they'd do without me. Mom started dropping passive-aggressive Facebook posts. You know the type. Family isn't always about blood, and some people only do nice things so they can hold them over your head later. Kendra doubled down by posting Instagram stories of her new family dinners with her friends, complete with captions like, "At least these people show up." Ray went silent, which was probably for the best. And Jordan? He actually texted me. Just wanted to say I get it now. I thought you were overreacting, but yeah, that was low. If you ever want to hang out, just us, I'm down. No pressure. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Jordan had always been the one who floated somewhere in the middle. Too passive to stand up for me. Too loyal to Kendra to question her. But maybe now he was finally seeing what I saw. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. A few more weeks passed. Mom missed her rent deadline. I knew because her building sent me the overdue notice by mistake. I was still listed as her emergency contact. I didn't call them. I didn't pay. She figured it out. Eventually, Dad ended up missing a DMV renewal because his expired insurance lapsed in the system. He paid out of pocket. I know this because he updated his own policy without asking me. First time in 6 years. Things were changing. And then, one Saturday morning, I got another knock on the door. This time it was Dad. No warning. No call. Just him, standing on my porch, holding 2 coffees. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, heavier around the eyes. I opened the door slowly. You drove all the way up here? He handed me one of the cups. Didn't think you'd answer the phone. I stepped aside. You were right. We sat in silence for a while. Just sipped our coffee. Watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes past the house. It felt normal, until he broke the silence. I read your message a few times, he said. I think I needed to see it in writing. I didn't realize how blind I'd been. I didn't say anything. I let Kendra do too much of the talking. She's always been the loud one. You've always been the quiet one. And I guess I just let her fill the space. I nodded slowly. She didn't just fill it, Dad. She used it. Weaponized it. He winced. Yeah, she did. Another pause. I'm not asking for money, he added quickly. I came here because I wanted to apologize. Not because I'm losing something, but because I already lost something. You. And I don't want to keep doing that. That caught me off guard. It was the first real apology I'd ever heard from him that didn't come with a condition or an ask. Just honesty. I set the cup down. Thank you, I said. That means more than you probably know. He nodded. I'm not perfect, but I'm learning. And I hope one day, the rest of the family learns too. After he left, I sat with it all. Let it sink in. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I was just tired. Tired of being the one who kept the engine running while everyone else got to ride in the passenger seat. But now, they were finally learning what the road looked like without me. Weeks turned into months. Kendra eventually sent me a long email. Half apology, half deflection. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust her. Not yet. Mom called again a few times. each one a little softer. A little more like the woman I remembered growing up with. I answered the last one. We talked. About nothing. About everything. She didn't ask for help. I didn't offer. That was the first real conversation we'd had in years. Jordan started visiting more. He even invited me to his new apartment, paid for on his own. He offered me a drink, and we sat on his mismatched couch and watched a game like brothers who didn't need words to patch things up. I didn't go back to paying their bills, but I did start building something else, boundaries. And weirdly, they started to respect them. Some days it was awkward. Some days it was healing, but it was finally real. And on my next birthday, I didn't make a reservation. I didn't send invites. I didn't pay for a single thing. Instead, I let people show me what they were willing to bring to the table. And for the first time in my life, they actually showed up. My name's Adam, and I'm 29 years old. If you asked anyone in my family who the quiet one is, they'd point to me. I'm not the type to shout at dinner or compete for the spotlight. I don't stir the pot. I listen more than I speak. I don't throw tantrums, even when I probably should. That's just never been my style. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like that, the quiet ones, tend to get underestimated. And sometimes, we're the ones who remember everything. My brother Nate is 2 years younger than me, and growing up, our dynamic was exactly what you'd expect between two boys close in age. Chaotic but close. We shared a room until I went to college, got into our fair share of backyard brawls, and covered for each other when things went sideways with our parents. But things changed after college. Nate got into sales and leaned hard into the image. Tailored suits, a leased BMW, and a social media feed full of gym selfies and motivational quotes he didn't live by. I stayed low-key, got my engineering degree, moved to a quieter city, built a solid life I didn't feel the need to post about. We still talked, but something was always off. Like I was only kept around out of obligation, not affection. When he got engaged to Brianna, a woman I had met exactly twice, I was genuinely happy for him. Even if she seemed like the kind of person who said things like, "We're just very curated as a couple," and acted like my job designing structural components for wind turbines was somehow less impressive than Nate selling luxury mattresses. I tried. I really did. I RSVP'd the same day I got the invite, offered to help with any tech or venue setup, was politely brushed off, and even Venmo'd $200 toward the joint bachelor-bachelorette weekend I wasn't invited to. The wedding was in a vineyard an hour outside the city. Rustic but overpriced, very on brand. I'd rented a suit, gotten a hotel room nearby, and brought a thoughtful gift, a card with a check for $1,500. It wasn't just generous, it was meaningful. That money wasn't pocket change for me. I had saved it slowly, wanting to contribute something significant because I genuinely believed this was supposed to be a big moment for my brother. I was nervous driving up, not because of the event, but because something in my gut told me this day wouldn't go smoothly. When I arrived at the venue, I saw the seating chart posted on a small easel by the entrance. I scanned it for my name. First time through, nothing. I looked again, then again. My name wasn't on it. Assuming it was an oversight, I headed inside and approached one of the wedding planners, a younger woman juggling clipboards and a walkie-talkie. "Hi, sorry," I said gently. "I don't think I see my name on the chart, Adam Reynolds." She glanced at me, clearly already exhausted, then flipped through her guest list. "Adam, oh, you're Nate's brother, right?" Her tone changed, like she realized something awkward. "Yeah, so, there were some last-minute shifts. I think you're supposed to be over by the west wall. There's a few open seats near the photo booth." The west wall. I blinked. That wasn't even at a table. It was near the speakers, where the extra folding chairs had been stacked like an afterthought. Still thinking it had to be a mistake, I made my way over. That's when I noticed it. The only labeled seat that should have been mine had a place card, but not with my name. It said, Tiffany, Cousins +1. I didn't even know who Tiffany was. But there she was, already sipping champagne in the seat I'd assumed was mine, laughing with a group of people I barely recognized. Trying to keep calm, I walked toward my mom, who was adjusting the boutonniere on my dad's jacket. "Hey," I said, trying to keep it casual, "do you know what's going on with the seating?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, yeah, Brianna's family had more people show up than expected, and they're all flying in from so far. We didn't want to move them. Just hang near the wall for the ceremony. You'll still see everything." "The wall," I echoed, a little too loudly. My dad gave me a look like I was making a scene. "It's not a big deal," my mom said, brushing me off with a wave. "Just don't ruin the pictures by sulking." I wasn't sulking. I was stunned. And then came the final twist of the knife, Brianna's voice. bright and sharp behind me. "Oh good, you found a spot," she said, not even waiting for a response. "We're just trying to keep the family photos looking clean, you know?" I don't know what my face looked like, but it must have said everything I was trying not to. Because she added quickly, "It's nothing personal. You'll still be in the reception shots, I promise." I nodded, tight-lipped. She walked off with her bridal posse in tow. There's a kind of humiliation that doesn't come with yelling or tears, just a slow, hollow ache in your chest as you realize you're not welcome somewhere you should have been. I stood there for a minute, trying to swallow it down. But then my eyes drifted across the room, to the gift table. A white linen-covered surface near the cake, loaded with pastel-wrapped boxes and fancy envelopes. Mine was easy to spot, matte silver, hand-addressed, tucked neatly under a thin ribbon. I had sealed that envelope with so much care, even tucked in a note about how proud I was of Nate, how I hoped the money would help start his next chapter. I didn't even think. I walked straight over, reached down, and calmly took it back. No one stopped me. No one even noticed at first. Until I turned toward the door, and someone, maybe one of the groomsmen, called out, "Hey, Adam, where are you going?" I didn't pause. I just looked over my shoulder, held the envelope up, and said, "Don't worry, I'll stay out of the frame forever." I was almost at the exit when I heard Nate's voice behind me. "Adam, wait." I stopped walking, but I didn't turn around. I stood there, right by the large double doors that led out to the gravel parking lot, one hand on the polished brass handle and the other gripping the envelope like it was the only solid thing keeping me grounded. "Adam," Nate said again, closer now, his shoes crunching softly on the floor behind me. "Come on, man, don't do this. It's not that deep." I turned slowly, and for the first time in years, I really looked at him. He was standing there in his designer tux, boutonniere slightly askew, champagne still fizzing in a glass in his left hand. He looked confused, like I was the one making a scene. Like he hadn't just relegated his own brother to a folding chair near the photo booth because Brianna's cousin brought an extra guest. "Not that deep?" I repeated, quietly. "Yeah," he said with a shrug, lowering his voice a little like he didn't want the other guests to hear. "It's just the seating, bro. It's not like we kicked you out. And Brianna's family, man, they flew in from, like, Portugal. We had to make room." I let out a short laugh, but it wasn't funny. "So I get to sit in a corner and hope no one asks if I'm the DJ? Dude, don't be dramatic. It's one day. You seriously gonna make this about you?" That one hit. Make this about me. I had spent years showing up for birthdays, holidays, family cookouts, always the one to send cards, to remember anniversaries, to stay late and help clean up while Nate disappeared to take a call. I never made anything about me, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe they all got so used to me not taking up space that the idea of me needing a chair, a single, literal chair, was suddenly too much. "I flew out," I said slowly. "I rented a hotel. I bought a suit. I gave you $1,500. We're giving," he corrected, pointing at the envelope. "Right?" I said. "Was." But then I realized something. "I'm not really your brother today. I'm just background." His jaw clenched. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "No," I said. "You already did. You just didn't think I'd notice." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Look, it was Brianna's call, okay? She wanted the photos to be all her close circle. Clean lines, matching colors. That kind of thing. So I didn't match?" I asked. "Did she run a background check on who had photogenic bone structure?" He didn't answer that. And maybe he knew better than to try. "You know," I said, finally walking back toward him, "I didn't expect a spotlight. I didn't even expect a toast or a dance or a shout-out. I just expected a seat. A place. Somewhere that said, 'You matter enough to be here like everyone else.'" "You do matter," he muttered, almost like it hurt to say. "Then why didn't you act like it?" His eyes flicked past me to the rest of the room, the guests who were now watching more openly, the photographer who was pausing mid-shot, the DJ lowering the volume slightly. He hated this kind of attention. I could see it all over his face. He'd wanted the day to be perfect, curated, Instagrammable. And now it wasn't. Not because I threw a tantrum, but because I refused to disappear quietly. "Look," he said through gritted teeth, "if this is about money." "It's not," I cut in. "It's about respect. And today showed me how little I have from you." He opened his mouth like he was going to protest, but nothing came out. Just a frustrated exhale. "I'm leaving," I said, adjusting the envelope in my hand. "But don't worry, I'll make sure the photos are perfect. No awkward older brother in the background to mess up the symmetry." I walked out before he could respond. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I made my way to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat behind the wheel for a moment, watching the vineyard fade into the distance through the rearview mirror. It was surreal, like I just stepped out of a movie where I wasn't cast as a main character, not even a supporting role. Just an extra who wandered too close to the shot. Back at the hotel, I changed out of the suit, packed my bag, and opened the envelope I had reclaimed. I pulled out the note I'd written, the one about being proud of him, about hoping the money helped them start a new chapter. I read it once, then tore it cleanly in half. Then I turned off my phone. It didn't stay off for long. About an hour later, when I powered it back on, I had 6 missed calls from Nate, from my mom, and a string of increasingly anxious texts. The last one was from Brianna. All it said was, "You really ruined everything today." And that was the moment the guilt stopped. That sentence, the way she framed it, like I had wrecked their carefully filtered little fantasy, made something in me finally click into place. I hadn't ruined anything. I had exposed it. But that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel before sunrise. The front desk clerk barely looked up when I dropped off my key card, which was fine, because I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I grabbed a stale croissant from the breakfast bar, tossed it in my passenger seat, and drove out of the vineyard town like it owed me money. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd racked up 11 more missed calls and 2 voicemails I had zero interest in hearing. My mom's text had shifted tone entirely from "you shouldn't have walked out" to "please call your brother, he's devastated," to the one that actually made me laugh. Family means sometimes making sacrifices, Adam. Sacrifices. I sat down on my couch, still in my jeans from the night before, rereading that sentence. It sounded like something ripped from a refrigerator magnet at a gas station gift shop. What exactly had Nate sacrificed? His wedding photos were still going to be on brand. His bride was still going to post them with captions like "blessed" and "our fairy tale begins." He'd still get the curated experience he wanted, minus one sibling who apparently clashed with the color palette. And here's the thing, I'd already made the sacrifices. They just never noticed. For the past year and a half, I'd been quietly helping Nate out with his startup, a mattress import business that was, frankly, bleeding money. It wasn't public knowledge, but back when he first launched it, he called me in a panic because he needed someone to co-sign a loan. Not for a house, not for a car, for a warehouse space and inventory contract. I didn't ask for anything in return. I figured, he's my brother. If he succeeds, we all win. If he fails, at least he tried. And yeah, maybe part of me hoped that helping him now would finally be seen as something more than just Adam being dependable. I never told our parents about it. I didn't even tell my friends. It was just something I quietly managed. I made sure the payments were on time, fielded a few calls from the bank when things got tight, and even wired him an emergency $3,000 last fall when his supplier nearly pulled out. All of it without a thank you longer than a one-line text. "Appreciate it, bro." That check I'd reclaimed from the gift table? That wasn't just a wedding gift. It was me finally drawing the line. But now, sitting there in my apartment surrounded by unopened mail and half-wilted plants, I realized something deeper. They didn't just forget my seat at the wedding. They had forgotten my role entirely. So I got to work. First, I opened my files, every email thread, every signed document, every bank statement tied to the loan. I was still the co-signer, which meant I still had administrative access. The loan wasn't fully paid down, not even close. And while I hadn't made any legal claims to the business, I had leverage. I didn't want to destroy him. I really didn't. But something about Brianna's text, "You really ruined everything today," echoed in my head like a dare. As if their perfect little world couldn't handle 1 ounce of reality. As if my silent support for the past 18 months was less important than how I'd look in the background of their Instagram carousel. I drafted an email. Simple, clean, legally sound. It notified the bank that, due to personal and financial reasons, I was formally withdrawing as co-signer and no longer authorizing any further use of my credit or identity in business operations. I attached the proper forms, copied Nate's email, and clicked send. Then, for good measure, I forwarded a few key documents to a lawyer friend of mine from college, just in case things got messy. Not because I expected a fight, but because Nate was impulsive and Brianna? Let's just say I didn't trust someone who referred to wedding centerpieces as branding assets. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. This time it was Nate. I answered. His voice was clipped. Tense. Did you just pull out of the loan? Yes. Why? Now. You're getting married, I said flatly. Time to stand on your own. There was a pause. Adam, come on. This is not the time to be petty. I could hear it, the frustration he was trying to keep in check, the tone of someone who still believed he was the reasonable one in the conversation, that I was just overreacting, that it would all blow over like one of his many overdue invoices. This isn't petty, I said. It's overdue. You're seriously doing this because of a chair? No, I said, leaning back. Because of a pattern. And a chair was just the final straw. He exhaled sharply. Okay, let's talk. Come over. We'll figure something out. You mean like how you figured out where to seat me? Or how to tell everyone I didn't matter enough for the photos? Or how to let your new wife treat me like an inconvenience? Silence. You didn't even ask if I was okay when I left, I added. You didn't check on me. You called because now there's something you want from me. Still silence. Then, more quietly, so, is this like, permanent? You're just done. I don't know yet, I said honestly. That depends on you. And then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt tired. Like I just finished cleaning up a mess that wasn't mine but had been left for me all the same. A mess that had been building for years in the unspoken slights, the shrugged-off moments, the quiet betrayals no one ever thought I noticed. What I didn't know yet was that Nate wasn't the only one rattled by what I'd done. The ripple effect had already started. Brianna's father, a quiet investor in Nate's business, had questions. My mother was now organizing a family mediation dinner, and my inbox was about to light up with messages from cousins who, it turned out, had also been snubbed by Brianna's guest list adjustments. But I'll get to that part soon, because the moment that truly shifted everything, the one where things went from awkward family drama to full-blown fracture, that came 3 days later. I got a Facebook message from my cousin Melissa. We weren't especially close, but we'd grown up around the same chaotic holiday dinners and shared more than a few eye rolls over the years. Her message was short. Hey, just wondering, were you also asked not to be in the family photos? That word also stopped me cold. We hopped on a call that night. Melissa had been seated at the farthest table, near the portable heaters. Her husband didn't even get a place card. Brianna, apparently, had sent an updated guest flow to the wedding coordinator 2 nights before the event, reshuffling seating to optimize the aesthetic. Translation: anyone over 30, under photogenic, or not TikTok presentable got pushed to the fringes. And it wasn't just Melissa. She'd already spoken to 2 other cousins, one who had driven 6 hours and wasn't even offered a drink, and another who brought a $400 espresso machine off their registry only to be seated behind a hedge. The more she dug, the more she found. Half the Reynolds side of the guest list had been sidelined in favor of Brianna's influencer circle, distant relatives from her mom's Pilates class, and people who fit the vibe. The wedding wasn't a celebration, it was a photo shoot with vows. Melissa ended the call with, I don't think I'm being dramatic, but this really feels like they used us as fillers. Background extras. Like they were embarrassed to actually have family there. I told her she wasn't being dramatic at all. Later that night, I got curious. I clicked over to Brianna's Instagram. Sure enough, the photos had started rolling in, perfectly filtered snapshots of rustic charm and candid laughs. Nate looked like an ad for cologne. Brianna looked like a bridal influencer on a sponsored post. The captions were as hollow as I expected. The day our forever began. I scrolled and scrolled. Dozens of photos. Not a single one featured a member of our family. Not even our parents. Not even Nate's best man, who, I found out later, was one of his old coworkers and not his actual best friend, because apparently he didn't fit the look. It hit me then. This wasn't just about me being disrespected. This was about the entire family being repackaged to fit a brand. And they thought none of us would say anything. The next morning, I called my parents. Mom answered on speaker, which meant Dad was hovering nearby. I kept it civil. I asked how they were doing, whether they got back okay, how the rest of the reception went. They were guarded, polite, but cautious. I could tell they weren't sure where I stood. Finally, Mom sighed and said, Adam, I wish you hadn't left like that. You embarrassed your brother. I waited a beat. Did he tell you where I was seated? There was a pause. I think there was a mix-up. You should have spoken up. Quietly. So it would have looked better on camera? I asked, not hiding the bite. She didn't answer that. I'm not angry, I said calmly. I'm just done pretending I wasn't treated like an afterthought. And apparently, I wasn't the only one. That got their attention. I told them about Melissa, about the cousins, about the people who were quietly simmering behind the scenes, all of them too polite to cause a scene, but not too blind to see what had happened. Dad finally spoke. He said Brianna organized most of it. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And Nate let her. That's the part no one's saying. Mom tried to defend him, said weddings are stressful, that couples make mistakes, that maybe they'd make it up to me later. They won't, I said flatly, because they don't think they did anything wrong. And that's when I told them about the loan. The silence on the other end was immediate and total. I gave it a second to sink in. You what? Dad finally asked. I co-signed the loan for Nate's warehouse lease, I said. 18 months ago. I've been covering the payments he couldn't. No one knew because I didn't make it a thing. I just did it. Quietly. Like I always do. Mom's voice cracked. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I was helping, I said. Because I thought that's what family did. I let the silence hang again. Anyway, I continued. I pulled out. I notified the bank. Nate's on his own now. Dad cleared his throat. He said you're trying to sabotage him. No, I said. I just stopped protecting him. Later that day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Mr. Galen, Brianna's father. His tone was icy but polite. He asked if I could clarify some sudden changes in loan agreements that had come to his attention. I explained the situation, my former involvement, my formal withdrawal, and the fact that I was under no legal obligation to continue supporting a business that had excluded me financially and personally from day one. I understand, he said, after a long pause. I just wish you'd spoken to me first. I wish a lot of things were done differently, I replied. The next 48 hours were a blur. The fallout spread fast. Nate called 3 more times. Left voicemails, none of which I answered. One was furious, the next apologetic, the third a mess of half excuses and forced chuckles. He said Brianna was super upset, and everyone's being dramatic, and can't we just hit reset? But I didn't want to reset. I wanted closure. That Friday, I got an invitation, not to another wedding, thankfully, but to a brunch organized by Melissa. A bunch of cousins and second cousins were planning a low-key get-together, partly to decompress and partly to quietly acknowledge that something had broken between us and Nate. It was casual. Just coffee, waffles, and people who actually wanted to see each other. No staged photos. No filters. No hierarchy of who looked good on camera. We swapped stories. Laughed about the absurdity. Cried a little, too, especially the cousin who had paid for her flight on a credit card just to support family. And near the end, Melissa looked at me and said, "Thank you for walking out. We were all thinking it. You just had the guts to do it." That stuck with me. It would have been easier to stay quiet. To sit in my little folding chair near the wall and smile politely for the camera. But instead, I stood up, not for drama, not for revenge, but because I finally knew my worth. And I wasn't going to let them crop me out of it. 3 weeks later, Nate sent a handwritten letter. I still have it, tucked in the drawer with the ripped-up note I once included with that $1,500 check. The letter was a mix of regret, frustration, and vague attempts at reconciliation. He never actually said the words, "I'm sorry." But he did write this. "I thought keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict. I see now it really meant ignoring you. I was wrong. I haven't responded. Maybe I will one day. Maybe I won't. But I know this. I'm no longer the background brother. I'm not a placeholder, or a fallback, or a chair by the wall. I'm Adam. And I finally chose myself. And this time, I stayed in the frame. The day my life flipped upside down started with a plate of scrambled eggs and a fake smile. I still remember the way the morning light hit the kitchen counter, how my mom's voice was just a little too cheerful, and how my dad kept tapping his wedding ring against his coffee mug like a metronome, as if rehearsing a speech in his head. My name's Trevor, and I was 18 when they sat me down that morning, 1 week before I was supposed to move into my college dorm. I'd spent the last year obsessively planning every detail, registering for orientation, shopping for secondhand textbooks, working nights at the grocery store to afford dorm decorations, and a decent laptop. I had a spreadsheet for everything. I even bought one of those tiny dorm-size fridges because I read somewhere that campus dining gets old fast. For most of high school, I'd been the quiet, responsible one in our family, the kind of kid who got straight A's, didn't go to parties, and stayed out of trouble. Not because I was scared of consequences, but because I thought it would mean something. I thought if I worked hard and didn't make waves, someone would notice. Maybe not with big dramatic praise or anything, but with little things, like keeping their promises. Like paying for the tuition they said they'd been saving for since I was 12. So that morning, when my mom said, "Trevor, sweetie, your dad and I need to talk to you about something important," I just smiled and took another bite of eggs. I had no reason to be suspicious. No reason to brace for the absolute gut punch that was coming. My dad leaned forward with that familiar calm face he always wore when he was about to lecture me about life being unfair. And then he said it. "We gave your tuition money to your brother. His business needs it more right now." Just like that. One sentence. No build-up. No apology. Just a cold, clinical statement like he was announcing the weather. I didn't even respond at first. I blinked. I remember staring at the salt shaker on the table because I couldn't look either of them in the eye. For a second, I thought maybe they were joking. But when I looked up, my mom had this strange expression, not guilty, not embarrassed. It was something closer to proud. "You should be happy," she said. "You're supporting the family in a big way. This is what being part of something bigger than yourself looks like." That's when it hit me. They weren't telling me this because they felt bad. They were telling me this because they thought I should be proud. Because in their eyes, I wasn't the one with dreams or goals anymore. I was just convenient. Let me back up a bit. My older brother, Jason, is 6 years older than me. Growing up, he was the golden child. Every mistake he made was a learning experience. Every time I got an A, he got a pizza party for remembering to take the trash out. When he dropped out of college after one semester to start a tech company in our garage, my parents acted like he'd discovered fire. They poured money into his startup like it was a trust fund, buying him gear, helping him rent office space, even co-signing a loan when things got tight. The company never really took off, but Jason always had a new pivot planned, a new idea that just needed a bit more runway. He wasn't lazy, I'll give him that, but he was reckless. He borrowed like nothing had to be paid back, promised things he couldn't deliver, and somehow always managed to convince our parents he was on the verge of something big. So when I got accepted into a great university, not Ivy League, but still competitive, and my parents assured me they had the first year covered, I believed them. I mean, why wouldn't I? I followed every rule. I played it safe. I stayed in my lane. And in return, I was supposed to get my shot. Instead, I got this. A morning lecture about making sacrifices served with eggs and toast. I asked one question. Just one. "So what am I supposed to do now?" My dad looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "Take a gap year. Get a job. Plenty of kids your age need time to figure things out." "I already figured it out," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "I'm supposed to move in next week." "We know," my mom said gently, as if that made it any better. "And we're really sorry about the timing. But you're smart, Trevor. You'll find another way." The worst part wasn't the decision. It was how they acted like this was my opportunity to grow. Like being robbed of my future was some kind of character-building exercise. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Then I excused myself from the table, walked upstairs to my room, and closed the door. That was the moment everything changed. Because deep down, something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic movie way, where I smashed a mirror or punched a wall. It was quieter than that. More final. Like a switch flipping off. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over every conversation I'd ever had with my parents that suddenly felt fake. All the times they told me they were proud. All the times they said, "We've got your back." It was like realizing your safety net was made of paper. The next morning, I started packing my bags. Not for college. For something else entirely. And that was the beginning. The beginning of a long year. The beginning of the silence between me and my parents. The beginning of me disappearing, not physically, but emotionally. I left the house with 2 suitcases, $1,000 from my grocery store job, and one rule burned into my mind. Never rely on anyone who treats you like a backup plan. And while my brother's business was burning money like a bonfire, I was about to start something of my own, something I didn't tell anyone about. Something quiet. Something smart. Because if they wanted me to support the family, I'd show them exactly what that looked like. But not in the way they expected. Not even close. I didn't have a plan. Not a real one, anyway. But I had drive. And rage. The kind of quiet, patient anger that doesn't burn out fast. The kind that simmers for months, crystallizing into something sharp. Something useful. I moved out the same day they dropped the bombshell. I didn't even give them a chance to ask where I was going. I just packed my laptop, my clothes, and the little money I had saved, and got in touch with a guy I used to work with at the grocery store, Connor, who had a spare room in his apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous. There was no air conditioning, and I had to sleep on a futon that creaked if I breathed too hard. But it was mine. And more importantly, it wasn't theirs. I didn't cut them off completely. At first, they texted a few times that first week, checking in like nothing happened. "How's the job hunt going? Let us know if you need anything." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. I was too busy feeling stupid for trusting them. Too busy drowning in the bitterness I had no outlet for. I spent my days flipping between Craigslist gigs and YouTube videos about digital marketing, e-commerce, coding, anything that might lead to something more stable than stocking shelves. At night, I worked shifts at a local sandwich shop. I told Connor I was just figuring things out for a year before college. I didn't tell him why. I couldn't even say it out loud without feeling a weird mix of humiliation and fury, like I'd been cheated and then expected to thank the dealer. Meanwhile, Jason was everywhere. He was all over my parents' social media. My mom posted pictures of his office like it was NASA headquarters. My dad shared links to his company's website like he was launching the next Google. Every caption was dripping with pride. "So proud of our oldest, chasing his dreams. Support small business. Check out Jason's new venture." It made me sick, not because he was succeeding, but because I knew he wasn't. I knew he was bleeding money, struggling to deliver on his overpromised contracts, scrambling to look legit while our parents threw everything at him like it was Monopoly cash. He wasn't evil, just spoiled. The kind of guy who never learned what no meant because no one ever said it to him. About a month after I moved out, my mom texted me a photo of Jason standing in front of a giant banner that said, "Genius Tech Solutions, Grand Opening." They rented out a co-working space downtown. Balloons. Ribbon-cutting ceremony. My parents were grinning in the background like they'd just won the lottery. I didn't reply. I didn't congratulate anyone. I just stared at that picture and realized how completely alone I was. And that's when something shifted. I could have kept sulking. I could have waited a year and tried again with scholarships and loans. But I knew better now. I knew if I wanted a future, I'd have to build it myself. Brick by brick. Out of spite, if nothing else. So I started learning. Obsessively. I'd always been tech-savvy. In high school, I ran a small tutoring side hustle, helped kids fix their phones, even built a few custom PCs. But now I started going deeper. I taught myself how to run Facebook ads, how to find winning dropshipping products, how to write sales copy that actually converts. I watched 10 hours of tutorials a day, took online courses I couldn't afford, and found other ways to access them. I tested every free trial known to man. Failed a lot. Lost money on bad product ideas. Ate way too many ramen cups. But I kept going. 3 months in, I launched my first real store. It was nothing flashy, just a niche gadget site selling portable humidifiers and phone holders. But I found a rhythm. I reinvested everything. Lived on pennies. I even canceled my Spotify subscription to save money and listened to motivational YouTube videos instead. The grind became addictive. And slowly, things started to click. By the 5th month, I was making more in a week than I used to make in a month at the sandwich shop. I didn't tell anyone. Not Connor, not my old friends, definitely not my family. This wasn't about bragging. It was about building something no one could take from me. Meanwhile, things at home got weird. My mom started calling again. At first, it was casual. A voicemail here, a message there. "Hey honey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay." Then it got more persistent. "We haven't heard from you in a while. Can we meet up? Your dad's worried." And then one day, she sent this. "Jason could really use your help. You're so good with computers." I read it 3 times. Laughed out loud. The audacity. I didn't respond. I didn't have to respond. Because at that point, I had something better, leverage. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. Not until the breaking point. That came 6 months later. I got a message from my cousin Erica. She was close with my parents. She babysat me when I was little, but we hadn't talked in years. She sent me a screenshot of a post from my mom's Facebook. Sometimes, family means making hard choices. We're so proud of both our sons, Jason, who's revolutionizing local tech, and Trevor, who's bravely taking a gap year to find himself. Supporting each other is what it's all about. My jaw clenched. Supporting each other. They were framing it like I had chosen to give up college. Like this was some noble self-sacrifice. Like I'd happily handed over my future so Jason could play CEO. And people were liking it. commenting, "You raised such generous boys. Trevor sounds like a sweetheart." I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet. I stayed focused. Until the call came. It was a Tuesday. I was in the middle of fulfilling orders when my phone rang. My dad. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, he called again. Then again. Finally, I answered. "Trevor," he said, breathing hard like he'd been running. "I need to talk to you. It's about Jason." I didn't say anything. He hesitated, then sighed. "His business, it's not doing well." "Oh, really?" "He's behind on rent for the office space. The loan we co-signed is, well, the payments are piling up." I stayed silent. "We were hoping," he said slowly, "that you might be able to help. You've always been good with numbers. Maybe you could take a look at the books. See if there's anything we're missing." That was the moment. The exact second I felt the fracture in our family widen into a canyon. They had taken everything from me. My trust, my future, my tuition, and now that it was falling apart, they came crawling back. But it got worse. My mom called later that night. Her voice was soft, like she was trying to cast a spell. "Sweetheart, we know things didn't go as planned, but Jason is your brother. He needs you. We all need you." I finally spoke. "You gave him my college fund." There was a pause. Then a sigh. "We loaned it to him. It was a family decision." "No, it was your decision," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't agree to anything. We didn't think you'd be so rigid about it." Rigid. Like expecting your parents to honor their word was some kind of personality flaw. "We've supported both of you in different ways," she added. "Jason just needs more right now." "And what do I need?" I asked. There was silence. That was the real answer. I wasn't supposed to need anything. I was supposed to give. Be the stable one. The fixer. The background character in Jason's startup drama. It all came to a head a week later when I stopped by their house. I don't even know why I went. Maybe some part of me still wanted them to acknowledge it, to own what they'd done, to apologize. Instead, I walked into a full-blown intervention. Jason was there. So were my parents. The living room was clean like they were expecting company. My mom smiled the moment I stepped in. "We're so glad you came. Sit down." I stayed standing. Jason looked exhausted. Bags under his eyes, laptop open in front of him. "Trevor, man," he said, "I messed up. I know I did. But I just need a little help. You're good at this online stuff. You've always been smart." My dad jumped in. "We're not asking for much. Just a few ideas. Maybe you could help him restructure the business. There's still time." I looked at all of them. "Did any of you ever think about helping me?" They blinked. Like I'd spoken in another language. "I needed help a year ago. I needed support. I needed you. But you didn't show up." My mom's smile faltered. "Honey, we were trying to do what's best for the family." "No," I said, my voice low, steady. "You were doing what was best for Jason. And now that it's all collapsing, you think I'm your safety net." Again, Jason opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to fix your mess. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your plan B." My dad stood, clearly annoyed. "Don't be dramatic, Trevor." I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being done." And with that, I walked out. They didn't follow. But 2 hours later, my mom sent one final message. "We just want our family back." And I stared at it, heart pounding, fingers hovering over the screen. Because they were right. Something had broken. But not the way they thought. Not something that could be fixed with a conversation or a hug. Something deeper. And I knew, in that moment, that the next move would be mine. And it would change everything. The day I walked out of my parents' house after their little family meeting, I felt 10 feet tall. Angry, yes, still raw with betrayal, but finally free. Like I'd stopped waiting for something that was never going to come. Their approval, their support, their respect, it had always come with strings. Always conditional. Always tilted in Jason's favor. But that adrenaline wore off fast. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. in the cramped apartment I shared with Connor, wondering what I was even doing. The glow from my laptop screen lit up the peeling paint on the wall. I had a Shopify dashboard open on one tab, a spreadsheet full of ad spend and conversion rates on another. It was the 5th day in a row I hadn't broken even. No sales. My ad account was flagged for unusual activity. My PayPal funds were on hold for fraud prevention. I had $213 in my bank account and no backup plan. That was rock bottom. Not just financially, but emotionally. Because up until that moment, I still carried this fantasy in the back of my mind that I'd win. That I'd make it big just to prove them wrong. But when your stomach growls and your rent is due and your store's checkout isn't working and no one is responding to your emails, all the revenge fantasies in the world start to feel like pipe dreams. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth, and I barely recognized the guy looking back. Pale skin, heavy eyes. I looked like a ghost in my own life. That same day, Connor caught me in the kitchen, hunched over my phone, doom-scrolling job listings. He didn't say much, just grabbed a soda from the fridge and leaned against the counter. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah, I lied." He nodded. "Cool. You still doing that online business thing?" I shrugged. "Trying." He paused for a second, then said something I'll never forget. "Well, just don't forget to eat. Even gladiators need sandwiches." It was such a dumb line, but I smiled for the first time in days. That afternoon, I walked to the library. Not a coffee shop, not some co-working space, just a public library with weak Wi-Fi and flickering lights. I stayed there for hours, no distractions, no noise, just me, a notebook, and the determination to figure things out. I made a new plan, a better one. Instead of chasing trendy products or trying to get rich fast, I decided to build something small, stable, and honest. I studied SEO like my life depended on it. Watched videos on affiliate marketing, niche content sites, building email lists, optimizing landing pages. No more get-rich-quick junk. No more dropshipping junk from shady suppliers. Just real, valuable content. That's how I started my first info site. It was about portable camping gear, something I actually cared about. I wrote every article myself. Spent weeks compiling product reviews, learning about keyword clustering, backlink outreach, and the dark magic of Google's algorithm. It was slow going. For the first month, the site barely broke 20 visitors a day. But I stuck with it. Updated articles. Split-tested headlines. Found better affiliate programs. Focused on trust. Meanwhile, I picked up freelance gigs to keep the lights on. Copywriting, SEO audits, even helping local businesses fix their broken websites. I was surviving again. Not thriving yet, but surviving. And then, a small miracle. 3 months into the site, one of my articles, Top 5 Ultralight Camping Stoves for 2022, got picked up by a bigger outdoor gear blog. They linked to it in a roundup post. Overnight, my traffic tripled. I made $180 that week in affiliate commissions. That's when I knew I had something. That small win became a spark. I kept building, wrote more articles, reached out to more blogs, hired a cheap editor from Upwork when I couldn't keep up, invested in a better theme, faster hosting, built a newsletter, launched a second site, this time in a totally different niche, minimalist productivity tools. By the end of that year, I was running 3 sites, one making $800 per month, one making $400, one barely breaking even. But together, they added up. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. I was free. I'd built it all myself. No college, no degree, no help, and still not a single word to my parents. They didn't know what I was doing. For all they knew, I was still finding myself, still floundering around in some post-gap year days while Jason tried to revive his tech Frankenstein. But even that was unraveling. Through the grapevine, mostly Erica, my cousin, who kept in touch despite the tension, I found out Jason's business was imploding. His main client had pulled out. His rent was overdue by 4 months. The loan our parents co-signed was in default. There were rumors of him being sued over undelivered software. Apparently, he'd started showing up to family dinners looking like a shadow of himself. His girlfriend left. He moved back into my parents' basement, the same one where his startup began years ago. My parents? They were cracking too. My mom posted less and less. No more gushing captions about Jason's brilliant mind. My dad stopped answering texts from extended family, who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about the money. And me? I moved into a better apartment. Got a new laptop, a standing desk, a potted plant I named Gordon. Even hired a virtual assistant to help with my third website. This one focused on home office gear. Irony wasn't lost on me. Jason had the flashy office with ribbon cuttings and glass walls. I had a quiet room, a decent chair, and consistent revenue. I thought about reaching out, thought about rubbing it in, but I didn't. I wasn't there yet. Because as good as things were getting, part of me still hurt. I couldn't explain it to anyone, not even Connor. It wasn't just about the money or college. It was the betrayal. The fact that the people who raised me, who claimed to love me, had looked me in the eye and told me my dreams didn't matter. that my future was disposable, that my hard work was negotiable. That leaves a mark. It changes how you trust. It changes how you hope. But even scars can harden into armor. And eventually, I started to feel strong again. One day, about a year after I left home, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Jason. His voice was shaky, quieter than I'd ever heard it. Hey, Trev. I know it's been a while. I don't know, man. Things are really bad right now. I messed up. I know I did. But I could really use some help. I listened to that message 6 times. Not because I was considering helping him. I wasn't. I listened because I wanted to understand what it sounded like when someone who'd always been handed everything finally ran out of hands to catch him. I never called him back, but I saved the message. It reminded me why I'd done all of this in the first place. Why I stayed up every night studying things no one taught me. Why I worked through panic attacks and $0 weeks and landlords who didn't care if you were figuring things out. Because they underestimated me. And that mistake was going to cost them. I wasn't the background character anymore. I was about to be the plot twist. Jason's voicemail sat in my inbox like a lit fuse that never quite went off. I listened to it every few days, not because I needed a reminder of how far I'd come, but because it grounded me. It reminded me that while I had spent the last year grinding in silence, growing in shadows, the people who wrote me off were now sinking in the mess they created. But I wasn't in a rush to gloat. Revenge, real revenge, isn't just about proving someone wrong. It's about letting them realize it themselves, slowly, painfully, without a lifeline. And that kind of reckoning takes patience, precision, a little bit of timing, and a whole lot of restraint. And now, finally, I had all 3. My first big opportunity came from a strange place, a LinkedIn message. One of the companies whose affiliate program I'd been working with reached out to ask if I'd be interested in consulting. Apparently, my site was driving them more sales than some of their bigger partners, and they wanted to know how. At first, I hesitated. I'd never done anything official like that. But the moment I saw their proposal, $3,000 for a 10-hour audit, I accepted. That single job paid 2 months' rent. That gig turned into 2 more. I suddenly had credibility, clients, referrals. But more importantly, I had an idea. It started as a joke, really. Connor and I were sitting in our apartment. He'd just quit his retail job to take a shot at app development. And I mentioned how funny it would be to make a public case study out of my journey. From betrayed to self-made. I called it. Connor laughed. You'd break the internet. I paused. No, seriously. What if I did tell my story? Not in a bitter way, but educational. Strategic. What if I turned everything they thought was my downfall into a blueprint for how to build something from nothing? He leaned forward. You'd get clients. Sponsors. Maybe a book deal. Maybe, I said, smirking. But more than that, I'd get eyes. Because if I was going to play this game, if I was going to dismantle their narrative and rewrite my own, I wanted them to see it. That night, I bought a new domain name. Something clean, professional. I started drafting the first of a multi-part blog series chronicling how I built my affiliate sites, how I handled burnout, how I navigated the minefield of online business without money or support. It wasn't emotional or bitter. It was surgical. Just the facts. Each post ended with a single line. No degree. No help. No excuses. The posts took off. First on Reddit. Then on Hacker News. Then a YouTuber in the finance niche made a reaction video titled, "The Kid Who Got Cut Off and Built an Empire." I gained over 10,000 email subscribers in 2 weeks. My site's traffic tripled. A company offered to buy one of them for mid-5 figures. I said no, because I had bigger plans. Plans that involved finally stepping out of the digital shadows and into the room where decisions are made. So I started going to local meetups, SEO events, tech panels, even a couple startup expos. I was quiet at first, observing, learning how people talked when they thought you weren't worth noticing. But eventually, I started speaking, sharing insights, offering advice. Not the flashy, hustle bro kind of advice, but real, gritty knowledge. People respected it. Some even took notes. That's how I met Marissa. She was a UX designer who had just exited her startup and was looking for her next thing. We grabbed coffee after one of the meetups and hit it off instantly. Sharp mind, dry humor, no tolerance for fluff. Within a week, we were brainstorming ways to merge my content strategy with her design expertise. By the end of the month, we had a plan. A real company. We called it Dust Proof. a digital product agency that built, scaled, and monetized niche content brands from scratch. I handled traffic and monetization. She handled branding and user experience. We split everything 50-50ths. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about proving a point. We weren't just building sites. We were building leverage. And now that I had it, I started preparing for the real revenge. It started, fittingly, with Jason. Thanks to Erica, who still floated in and out of our group chats, I found out he was trying to land a new investor. Apparently, some local business incubator was considering him for a $50,000 grant, hoping to help reboot struggling tech founders. Jason had pitched them a half-baked pivot, an AI-driven small business assistant app. Total buzzword salad. But they were eating it up because he was well-connected and had experience. Marissa raised her eyebrow when I told her. He's seriously pitching AI now. Oh yeah, I said. He dropped out of college, burned through hundreds of thousands, got bailed out by his parents, and now he's selling himself as a visionary. She sipped her drink. Let's bury him. I grinned. Thought you'd never ask. First step? We built a competing concept. Same space, same market, better name, better branding, and more importantly, an actual MVP that worked. We didn't even try to hide it. We gave it a name just one syllable off from Jason's, similar enough to trigger curiosity, different enough to be legal. We made a beautiful landing page. We recorded demo videos. We published a blog post titled, "What Most Business Apps Get Wrong and How We Fixed It," complete with screenshots, testimonials, and a live waitlist. Then we ran ads. Cheap ones, targeted directly at the incubator's zip code. Within days, our version was all over their LinkedIn feeds. I even joined the incubator's public Slack channel using a pseudonym, just to lurk. And sure enough, 3 days later, someone posted, "Hey, has anyone seen this new tool? Looks super clean. Might be worth looking into before we finalize the next grant." Jason never saw it coming. Erica texted me the next morning. "Not sure if you were involved, but Jay is freaking out LOL." I didn't reply, just put my phone down and got back to work. Because as satisfying as it was to trip him up, he wasn't the real target. My parents were. They were the ones who bet against me, who told me I should be proud of giving up my future, who clapped at Jason's grand opening and ghosted me when I asked, "What am I supposed to do now?" I could have sent them a letter, an invoice, a link to the blog, but that would have been too easy. Instead, I waited for the perfect moment, and it came just in time for my cousin Mallory's wedding. She was getting married at a local vineyard, and everyone was invited. My entire extended family. Jason, my parents, even people I hadn't seen since middle school. Erica sent me a screenshot of the guest list and asked if I was going. I almost said no. The idea of walking into that event, surrounded by people who thought I was a dropout drifting through life, it made my skin crawl. But then I had an idea. A proper setup. I called Marissa. "How do you feel about a little show and tell?" She laughed. "I love drama. What are you thinking?" "I want to arrive like a ghost turned millionaire." "Oh," she said, grinning through the phone. "We're doing a reveal." So we planned it. We bought a new suit, tailored, sleek. No logos, no flash, just presents. Marissa helped me write a bio card for the event, a little folded piece of paper that introduced Dustproof as a sponsor of the venue's upcoming small business retreat. I made sure they included our site and my name, Trevor Lane, co-founder. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't RSVP. I just walked in. And when I did, every conversation in a 10-foot radius slowed to a crawl. Because the last time they saw me, I was the kid who vanished before college. The one who gave up his tuition. Who took a gap year to figure things out. Now I looked like someone you Google. And Jason? He was at the bar, nursing a drink, looking like a man 2 steps away from a nervous breakdown. Our eyes met. He blinked. I nodded. No words. My mom was halfway across the room, talking to some great aunt I barely remembered. When she finally noticed me, her face went through a full 4-stage reaction. Confusion, recognition, forced smile, and something close to panic. I walked over. Calm. Civil, like someone who didn't need anything from anyone. "Trevor," she said, breathless. I didn't know you were coming." "I wasn't sure either," I said smoothly. "But one of the event sponsors invited me." Her face twitched. "Oh," she said. I let that hang in the air. My dad joined her a moment later. His smile was tighter, more forced. "Son," he said, "it's good to see you." Likewise. He tried to ask more, but I turned to greet someone else, the event planner, and handed her my bio card to confirm my table. She took one look, smiled, and said, "Oh, you're the guy from Dustproof. We've heard so much about your work." My parents went silent. It wasn't about flaunting anything. It was about presence, about reclaiming the space I was pushed out of, about making them watch. Because the show was just beginning. The wedding reception unfolded like a stage play, and I was done playing the background character. My parents sat stiffly at their table across the room, barely sipping their drinks. Jason hovered nearby, clearly rattled, glancing toward me every few minutes like I was a ghost he couldn't quite banish. A few of our cousins made small talk with me, polite, curious, awkward. One of them, Devin, leaned in with a smirk and said, "Didn't you drop out or something? What are you up to now?" I didn't say a word. I just gestured toward the dust-proof placard at the table, where my name sat beside a short description of the company I co-founded, and where a subtle QR code led directly to a case study titled, "The Tuition That Wasn't: How Losing Everything at 18 Helped Me Build a $500,000 Content Portfolio Before 21. It was gentle. I hadn't named names. No rants, no Reddit posts, no spiteful breakdowns. Just clean data, neutral tone, documented timeline. But anyone with half a brain could read between the lines. And judging by the look on Jason's face when he scanned the code, yes, I saw him do it. He definitely had half a brain. The fallout started 2 days later. I got a text from my dad. "We need to talk. Face to face." I didn't reply. Then my mom. "Your post. People are asking questions. Please take it down." That made me laugh. Take it down? After they framed me as the selfless little brother who nobly stepped aside for the future entrepreneur of the family? No, this was the reckoning. And it wasn't even personal anymore. It was structural, clean, unavoidable. Because the moment the case study went viral, people started connecting dots. Erica told me Jason's former contractor, the one he ghosted after promising stock options, shared the link on Twitter with the caption, "Oh, so this is why he never paid me." A day later, the local startup incubator that had been considering Jason for a second round of funding posted a quiet update on their website announcing a pause on external investments pending internal review. Translation: Jason wasn't just off the list. He torched the list. Meanwhile, a few of Jason's early investors, most of them local dentists and real estate guys my dad played poker with, were not happy. The case study didn't name them, but it traced the path of money through vague phrases like family-backed startups with no KPIs, and early investors promised high returns with zero oversight. Anyone involved knew exactly who that was about. One of them, Dr. Kelman, apparently cornered my dad at a neighborhood barbecue and asked point-blank, "Did you give your kids tuition to Jason's startup?" My dad didn't answer. But silence, in those circles, speaks volumes. I started hearing from people, old teachers, a few of my high school classmates, even one of Jason's exes. They all reached out with some variation of, "I read your article." I had no idea, because that was the power of the truth, not shouted, not dramatized, just documented. Calm, measured, unapologetic. And that calm, more than anything, is what unraveled them. Jason tried to respond, sort of. He published a blog post of his own, a half-hearted, jargon-filled mess titled "Entrepreneurship is Messy: Lessons from a Startup That Didn't Go as Planned." It was full of vague apologies and phrases like pushing boundaries and building under pressure and learning from challenges. No one bought it. In fact, the comments were brutal. This is what happens when you play with other people's money. Your brother had every right to speak up. You owe him more than an apology. You didn't fail because you took risks. You failed because you took people. My parents, though, they didn't respond publicly. That wasn't their style. But they felt it. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. My mom unfriended half the extended family on Facebook. My dad shut down his LinkedIn. At first, I thought it was shame. But it wasn't. It was control slipping through their fingers, quietly, relentlessly. And as they shrank inward, my world expanded. I accepted a speaking invitation at a digital entrepreneurship conference in Austin. Shared the stage with founders twice my age. Dinners, panels, interviews, all of it surreal. And all of it earned. Marissa and I grew Dustproof into a full-blown operation. We hired 2 writers, a project manager, and a sales lead. By the time my 21st birthday rolled around, Our monthly revenue had crossed $50,000, not including affiliate commissions or licensing deals. And the best part? I never told my parents. Not directly. I never called them to brag. Never texted, "Told you so." Never dropped bank statements in the group chat. Because silence was louder. Distance was louder. And dignity? Dignity screamed. One last thing happened that made me realize the story had come full circle. It was a Saturday morning when I saw the listing. Jason's startup, what was left of it, was being liquidated. Office furniture, monitors, a few standing desks. All of it posted on Facebook Marketplace under a burner account with no profile picture. I bought one of the desks. Had it delivered to the dustproof office. Marissa thought it was a weird move, but I told her, some things just belong where they're finally useful. And now, every time I sit at it, this sleek, slightly scuffed $1,200 ergonomic relic of his failed empire, I smile. Because this was my revenge. Not noise, not spectacle, just quiet, undeniable success. The kind they couldn't ignore, the kind they couldn't touch, the kind that reminded them, every single day, that they bet against the wrong sun. And they lost. I was standing in the corner of the party room with a paper plate in my hand when it happened. The moment that still burns in my mind like a bad movie I can't shut off. My name is Jason, I'm 32, and all I wanted was for my son's 6th birthday to be a happy memory for him. Balloons, party hats, a dinosaur cake he'd been talking about for weeks, the whole deal. But as I walked toward the dessert table to get him a slice, I noticed the cake was missing. At first I thought one of the staff had moved it to the back to cut it. Then I saw it. In the trash. Face down. Smashed. And my sister, Rachel, was standing right there, leaning against the counter like she owned the place, scrolling through her phone with that smug half-smile she reserves for moments she knows will hurt. I asked her what happened, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. She didn't even look up, just shrugged and said, "He didn't deserve it anyway." Like it was a joke. Like my son's birthday cake being thrown away was some kind of moral lesson. I felt my stomach twist, a mix of anger and disbelief. My son was in the corner playing with his little friends, completely unaware that his special moment had just been trashed, literally. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stare at Rachel, trying to process what I'd just heard. I asked her again, slower this time, if she had something to do with it. She finally looked up, rolled her eyes, and said, "Relax, Jason. It's just cake." It wasn't just cake. It was the look on my kid's face when he'd been telling everyone about his birthday for the last month. It was the fact that I had spent hours the night before setting up decorations because no one else in the family offered to help. It was the way Rachel had been taking little shots at me all day. Comments about how some people go overboard. Or, "It's not that deep, he's just a kid." And now this. I could feel every muscle in my body tense up. I didn't want to start a scene with kids running around. So I went over to my son, told him we were leaving, and packed up what little was left of the party favors. I texted the parents of the other kids, made some excuse about him not feeling well, and got us out of there before Rachel could say anything else. The drive home was quiet. My son was clutching the dinosaur figurine that came with the cake topper, asking why everyone had to go home early. I told him we'd have our own little party later, just the two of us, and we'd get a new cake. He smiled, which somehow made me feel both relieved and even angrier at the same time. Relieved because he was okay, but angry because he shouldn't have had to be. That night, I sat in my living room long after he went to bed, staring at the phone, waiting for someone, anyone, in my family to call and ask what happened. No one did. But the next morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. She didn't ask about my son, didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge what had happened. Her voice was shaky, but not with guilt, with panic. "Jason," she said, "I need you to talk to the venue before they cancel Rachel's wedding." I just sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. She was calling me about Rachel's wedding? Less than 24 hours after my son's birthday had been ruined? I asked her if she was seriously not going to say anything about what happened yesterday. She went quiet for a moment and then said, "Look, I know Rachel can be harsh sometimes, but this is her big day coming up and we can't have any drama with the venue." Something inside me snapped at that moment. It wasn't just yesterday. It was every holiday where Rachel's preferences came first. Every family photo where she got to be in the center because she's the firstborn. Every time I'd been told to just let things go for the sake of peace. My jaw tightened as Mom kept talking about deposits and deadlines and how the venue manager was threatening to cancel because Rachel hadn't paid the balance yet. She wanted me to call, smooth things over, maybe even cover the cost until Rachel sorted things out. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just told her I had to think about it and hung up. Then I sat there for a long time, staring at my son's little toy dinosaurs scattered across the floor, feeling this strange calm settle over me. For years, I'd been the one to keep things running smoothly, to fix things when Rachel messed up, to be the reasonable one. But now, I wasn't sure I wanted to fix anything. And that's when the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting maybe a neighbor, maybe a package. Instead, it was my dad standing there with his arms crossed, looking irritated like I'd personally inconvenienced him just by existing. He didn't even say hello, just brushed past me into the living room like he owned the place. "We need to talk about Rachel's wedding," he said, glancing at the toys on the floor like they were some sort of offense. I just stood there for a moment, still processing the fact that the man who hadn't once checked on his grandson after yesterday's disaster was now in my living room to talk about money for his favorite child's big day. I asked him straight out if he knew what happened at my son's party. He shrugged, literally shrugged, like he was talking about a weather report. "Kids are resilient," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "What matters now is making sure your sister's wedding doesn't turn into a circus." That word, circus, hit me harder than I expected. Because to him, that's what my kid's ruined birthday was. Just noise, just an inconvenience. He sat down on my couch like he was preparing for a lecture and started explaining how the venue had called him too, how they were concerned about payment and threatening to cancel if they didn't get the balance. He leaned forward, looked me right in the eye, and said, "You're good with people, Jason. You always smooth things over. Can't you just take care of this? You make more money than Rachel. It's nothing to you." There it was. The unspoken family rule said out loud. Jason fixes things. Jason sacrifices. Jason makes it right because he can. I asked him why Rachel wasn't taking care of her own wedding bill, and he sighed like I was being dense. "She's under a lot of stress," he said. "Planning a wedding is expensive. She's had to cut back her hours at work." I reminded him that Rachel had chosen to cut her hours at work to focus on herself, and had spent the last 3 weekends going on spa days with her friends, something she bragged about in the family group chat. He ignored that, changed the subject, and started talking about how this wedding is important for the family's reputation and how people will talk if it gets canceled. That's when my son walked into the room, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up on one side. He saw my dad and smiled shyly, holding up his toy dinosaur. "Grandpa, look," he said, clearly trying to show off his favorite toy. Dad barely glanced at him before going back to his speech about Rachel. My son's smile faltered, and he went back to his room quietly. I watched him go, and something in me hardened. I told my dad I wasn't sure I wanted to help with Rachel's wedding, not after what happened yesterday. His expression changed instantly. Gone was the calm, reasonable father. He frowned and said, "Don't be petty, Jason. This is bigger than a cake. You know how Rachel is." She didn't mean it. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him if he would have said the same thing if someone had ruined Rachel's wedding cake. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and said, "I really hope you're not planning to hold the family hostage over this." Then he left, slamming the door behind him. That night, Mom called again. This time she tried a softer approach. She told me she understood why I was upset, but I needed to think about the bigger picture. "You know how your sister is," she said, echoing Dad. "She's always been difficult. But this wedding is her dream, Jason. If the venue cancels, she'll never forgive you." I told her it wasn't my responsibility to fix Rachel's mistakes. There was a pause on the line, and then Mom said something that made my blood run cold. "If you don't step in, your father and I will have to use the savings we were keeping for your son's future. Is that what you want? For him to miss out on college because you couldn't let go of some cake?" I didn't even know they had savings set aside for my son. I asked her why they hadn't told me about it before, and she brushed it off, saying it was meant to be a surprise later. But now, apparently, it was leverage. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive group chat messages and relatives calling me to be the bigger person. My aunt texted me a paragraph about family unity. My cousin called to say Rachel was crying and felt attacked. Rachel herself didn't bother contacting me directly, but she posted on social media about toxic people trying to ruin the happiest day of my life. It didn't take a genius to figure out who she meant. Meanwhile, my son kept asking when we could have his real birthday cake. I promised him we'd do something special, just the two of us, that weekend. We went to a little bakery downtown, picked out the biggest chocolate cake they had, and celebrated in our kitchen with party hats and streamers I put up myself. It was simple, but it made him so happy. Watching him laugh with frosting on his face made me realize how long I'd been letting my family's drama dictate my happiness. A few days later, Mom showed up at my house unannounced. She came in looking like she'd been crying, sat down at the table, and launched straight into her plea. The venue says if we don't pay by Friday, they'll cancel. Your father is furious. Rachel is devastated. Please, Jason, you're the only one who can stop this. I asked her what Rachel had said about my son's birthday. She hesitated, then said, she feels bad. I told her that wasn't good enough. If Rachel wanted my help, she could come over, look me in the eye, and apologize, not just to me, but to my son. Mom didn't like that. She said I was putting conditions on family love. I stayed firm. I told her that love goes both ways, and right now, all I saw was everyone expecting me to sacrifice, while Rachel got whatever she wanted. Mom left looking disappointed, and not even an hour later, I got a text from Rachel. Stop trying to control everything. It's not my fault your kid can't handle a little disappointment. Pay the venue or don't, but stop making this about you. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I screenshotted it and sent it to Mom and Dad with one sentence. This is what your devastated daughter thinks. Mom didn't reply. Dad sent a single text. We'll talk later. I knew what that meant. Another confrontation was coming, and I was done backing down. 2 days after Rachel's text, I came home from work to find an envelope taped to my front door. No name, no return address, just my first name scribbled across it in Mom's handwriting. I pulled it off, walked inside, and opened it on the kitchen counter. Inside was a folded letter and a bank statement. The letter was short, almost cold. It said that since I had refused to support the family in their time of need, Mom and Dad had decided to withdraw the savings they'd been keeping for my son and use them to cover Rachel's wedding balance. The bank statement showed the withdrawal, tens of thousands of dollars, money I didn't even know existed until last week, gone. At the bottom of the letter, Mom had written, "We hope you will still come to the wedding and put this ugliness behind us." I stood there, staring at the paper, my hands shaking. My son was in the living room watching cartoons, completely oblivious to the fact that the money meant for his future had just been taken to fund a party he wasn't even excited about going to. My chest felt tight. It wasn't just about the money, it was the audacity. The decision had been made without even asking me, without even a conversation. I called Dad immediately. He picked up on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "I figured you'd call," he said, like this was all just an inevitable step in some plan. I asked him if he really thought it was okay to take money meant for his grandson and spend it on Rachel's wedding. He didn't hesitate. "It's not just Rachel's wedding, Jason. It's a family event. Your son will benefit too, being part of a happy occasion." I almost laughed because it was so absurd it didn't sound real. I told him my son didn't even understand what was going on, that he'd barely seen Rachel in the last year because she never made time for him. Dad's voice turned sharp. "This attitude is exactly why we didn't tell you about the savings sooner. You'd hoard it and make everything about your son when this is supposed to be about all of us." Hoard it. That word burned. This wasn't hoarding. This was planning for the future, for the kid they were supposed to love just as much as Rachel. But to them, his future was negotiable, a bargaining chip to keep the peace. When I got off the phone, I didn't even realize how hard I'd been gripping the counter until I saw the faint white marks on my hands. My phone buzzed again a few minutes later. This time it was Rachel. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a photo of her in a wedding dress at a fitting with the caption, "Thanks for finally stepping up. Knew you'd do the right thing eventually." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I went into my son's room, sat on the edge of his bed, and just watched him play with his Lego set. He looked up at me, smiling, and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to make cakes so no one ever throws them away." I felt something in my chest twist so hard I had to look away. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter, that smug text from Rachel, and my son's little face, when he said that. It felt like I was back in high school again, being told to give Rachel the front seat, to give Rachel the last slice of pizza, to skip my plans because Rachel needed a ride. Except this time it wasn't a slice of pizza, it was my kid's future. A few days later, the betrayal deepened in a way I didn't think was possible. I got a call from the school. My son's kindergarten teacher sounded concerned. She said my parents had come by the school earlier that day, saying they were there to pick up their grandson early. Apparently, they told the staff that I had approved it, which I hadn't. Luckily, the school called me first to confirm, but the fact that they had tried to take my kid without telling me left me cold. I called Mom immediately. She sounded cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "We just wanted to take him shopping for a little suit for the wedding," she said. "You weren't answering your phone, so we figured we'd surprise you." I told her flat out she was never to take my son from school without my permission again. There was a long pause before she said, "Jason, you're overreacting. We raised you. We know how to take care of a child." This attitude is why Rachel says you're becoming impossible to deal with. It was like a switch flipped in my head. Impossible to deal with. That's what they called me when I stopped doing their taxes for free, when I told them I couldn't babysit Rachel's dog every weekend, when I dared to say no to anything that inconvenienced me. The next day, I got another letter. This one wasn't taped to my door, it was slid under it. Inside was an invitation. A wedding invitation. My name wasn't on it. Neither was my son's. The envelope had been addressed to me, but inside it said, "Mr. Jason plus guest." No mention of family, no mention of my son as ring bearer or anything else. It was a message, and I got it loud and clear. When I called Mom to ask if it was a mistake, she said, "Rachel wanted a small ceremony. Kids make things complicated." I asked her if she was seriously telling me that after taking my kid's savings to fund this wedding, he wasn't even welcome to attend. She said, "You're welcome to bring a guest. Maybe someone special. It's time you moved on and focused on your own life instead of being so wrapped up in your child." I hung up before I said something that would scorch the earth. I just sat in my quiet house for a long time, staring at that invitation on the table. It felt like my whole life had been leading to this one boiling point. Every slight, every little favor I'd done, every time I'd bitten my tongue for the sake of peace. This was the line. That night, as my son slept, I opened my laptop and started going through my files, emails, receipts, copies of text messages. For years, I'd kept records because I was the one who handled family logistics, vacations, payments, even Rachel's rent once when she'd been between jobs. It was all there. Every time I'd bailed her out. Every time I'd quietly paid for something so she wouldn't face consequences. I sat there until 2 in the morning, piecing it all together like a puzzle, my anger cooling into something sharper, something more deliberate. By the time the sun came up, I knew one thing for sure. They might have taken my son's savings, but they weren't going to take my dignity. Not this time. And that's when Rachel herself showed up at my door. Rachel didn't knock. She just stood there on my porch like she'd been waiting for me to open the door. Her arms were crossed, and she was wearing that same smug half-smile I'd seen at my son's party. I thought about not letting her in, but before I could decide, she said, "Can we talk?" Her tone was casual, like we were discussing what to have for lunch instead of the fact that she'd just gutted my trust and used my kid's future savings as her wedding fund. I stepped aside without saying a word, and she walked in, glancing around my house like she was checking for dust. She sat down at the kitchen table without being asked, leaned back in the chair, and started scrolling her phone like she wasn't in the middle of detonating what was left of our relationship. "So," she said finally, "I hear you're mad." Mad. That word sounded so small compared to what I was feeling. I sat across from her and asked if she had any idea what she'd done to me, to my son. She looked at me like I was being dramatic and said, "Jason, you're acting like they stole from you. Mom and Dad were just reallocating family resources. And honestly, you should be glad it's going to something meaningful. You can always make more money for your kids' college, but my wedding only happens once." I stared at her, wondering if she really believed what she was saying or if she just enjoyed twisting the knife. She kept talking, explaining how stressful wedding planning had been, how expensive everything was, how she had to cut work hours because she needed to be present for fittings and tastings. The more she talked, the more I realized she didn't see me as her brother. She saw me as a resource, a tool to be used to smooth out the bumps in her life. When I didn't say anything, she put her phone down and said, "Look, I get that you're hurt, but this isn't just about you. The family needs you to step up. You've always been the responsible one. It's who you are. And let's be honest, Jason, it's not like you had big plans for that money anyway." That last sentence hit me like a punch. I stood up and told her to leave. She acted surprised, like I was overreacting, but when she saw I wasn't joking, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "Fine. Just don't ruin the wedding with your mood." Then she walked out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. After she left, I sat at the table for what felt like hours, staring at the empty chair she'd just been sitting in. It was quiet, too quiet, and that's when it really hit me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was empty, tired, done. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch while my son slept in his room, staring at nothing. The next day at work, my boss asked if I was okay because I guess I looked as bad as I felt. I lied and said I was fine. Then came the family group chat. It started with Mom posting a picture of Rachel's engagement photos, followed by a caption, "So proud of our girl," counting down the days. Everyone chimed in with hearts and emojis. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I was coming to the wedding. No one even said my name. It was like I'd been erased from the family overnight. I quietly left the chat. No announcement, no message, just gone. A few hours later, I got a private text from Mom. "Why would you do that? You're making this harder than it has to be." I didn't reply. Over the next week, the silence from my side must have made them nervous because the phone calls started ramping up. First Mom, then Dad, then my aunt, then even my grandmother, each one delivering their own version of the same lecture. Family is everything. Rachel is sensitive. I need to be the bigger person, and so on. Every time I let the calls go to voicemail, I felt a little bit lighter and a little bit lonelier. The real low point came the following weekend. I had promised my son we'd go to the park, but when we got there, I saw Rachel and Mom sitting on a bench, sipping coffee. They looked up when they saw us, and Rachel smirked. "Oh, look who finally came out of his cave," she said loudly enough for me to hear. Mom didn't say anything, just gave me this look, a look that said I was being ridiculous, that I was the one causing all this tension. My son wanted to play, so I let him go to the swings while I stood off to the side. I could hear Rachel talking to Mom about wedding colors, laughing like none of this mattered. Then Rachel called out, "Hey Jason, you should smile more. You're going to look miserable in all the wedding photos." I didn't answer. I just took my son's hand, told him we were going to get ice cream instead, and left. That night, I broke down. I sat on the floor of my kitchen after my son went to bed and just let it all out. Years of being second to Rachel, years of swallowing insults, years of being the family fixer. I cried until I didn't have anything left, and then I just sat there in the dark, staring at the fridge. But somewhere in that quiet, something started to shift. The anger that had been boiling finally cooled, and what was left was clarity. They had taken everything they could from me: money, time, emotional energy, and they still wanted more. They wanted me to show up to that wedding, smile, pretend everything was fine, and let Rachel walk all over me again. I wasn't going to give them that. The next morning, I started taking small steps. I called the bank to open a new account just for me and my son, separate from anything my parents could access. I spoke to my HR department about setting up an education fund through work so no one could touch his future again. I went through every shared bill and subscription I had with my parents: phone plans, streaming accounts, even the joint Costco membership, and one by one, I removed myself. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Mom noticed, of course. She called me that evening, furious. "Are you trying to punish us?" she demanded. I stayed calm and told her I was just taking care of my own responsibilities. She accused me of abandoning the family. I didn't argue. I just said, maybe that's what needs to happen. After that, the calls stopped. The silence this time felt different, heavier, but also freeing. One night, I sat down with my son and told him we might not be going to Aunt Rachel's wedding. He thought about it for a moment and said, "That's okay. Can we have cake that day instead?" I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks and said, "Yeah, buddy, we can have as much cake as you want." And that's when I got the email, an official one from the venue itself. It wasn't addressed to me, but I was CC'd, probably by accident. It was a notice of possible cancellation due to a payment dispute and unprofessional communication from the client. I read it twice, my heart thudding in my chest. Rachel's perfect wedding was about to fall apart, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a flicker of control again. Not revenge, not yet. Just control. I closed the laptop slowly, already feeling the beginning of a plan taking shape in the back of my mind. Because if my family thought they'd seen me at my worst, they hadn't seen anything yet. Something changed in me after that email. For weeks I had been moving through life like a ghost, weighed down by every insult, every passive-aggressive comment, every time they had made me feel like the problem. But now I had proof that the perfect image they were clinging to, the dream wedding, the family unity they kept throwing in my face, was already crumbling on its own. And for once, I didn't feel powerless. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, made pancakes with my son, and actually enjoyed breakfast. Not rushed, not distracted, but present. I think he could tell something was different because he kept grinning at me and saying, "You're not sad today." I wasn't. When I got to work, I threw myself into my projects in a way I hadn't in months. My boss noticed and asked if something good had happened. I just smiled and said I was making space for better things. By the end of the week, I'd closed a big deal that earned me a bonus. It wasn't life-changing money, but it felt symbolic, like life was giving me back some of what had been taken. I used part of that bonus to book a small weekend trip for me and my son. Nothing fancy, just a cozy cabin by the lake a few hours away. We spent the weekend fishing, building campfires, and eating marshmallows until we were both sticky and laughing. For the first time in months, I didn't think about Rachel, the wedding, or the family drama. It was just me and my boy, and it felt right. When I got back, my phone was full of missed calls and messages. Mom had sent a long text about how the family was hurting without me and how I was breaking Rachel's heart. I read it once, then put the phone down. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept building my life outside of them. I signed my son up for a weekend soccer program and went to every practice, cheering from the sidelines. I started cooking again, experimenting with recipes we could make together. At night, after he went to bed, I worked on a side project I'd been putting off for years, an app I'd always wanted to launch, but never had the time or energy to finish because I was too busy fixing everyone else's problems. As the weeks passed, I felt stronger, calmer, sharper. The constant knot in my stomach started to unwind. Then one day, I got an unexpected email from the venue again. This time I wasn't just CC'd, it was sent directly to me. The manager said she knew I was related to the couple and asked if I could help mediate because Rachel had been unresponsive and rude during their last interaction. She said the deadline for payment was approaching and hinted that the venue was seriously considering canceling the reservation if things didn't improve. I stared at that email for a long time. This was it, the moment my family had been waiting for me to swoop in and save them. Only this time, I didn't feel the usual pressure to fix everything. Instead, I wrote back politely, thanked her for the update, and said I was not involved in any financial or planning decisions for Rachel's wedding. Then I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and went outside to play catch with my son. That night, I got a string of frantic texts from Rachel. "Why would you tell them you're not involved? They think we can't pay now. Do you want my wedding to get canceled?" I didn't reply. The next day, she sent another message. "Fine. If you want to be a jerk about it, just know you're dead to me after this." I sat there reading it, and instead of feeling crushed, I felt free. Like a weight had been lifted. That freedom made me bold. I decided to take a social media break, not to avoid them, but to reclaim it. I cleared out my friend lists, archived old family photos, and posted a single update. A picture of me and my son at the lake, smiling with the caption, "Best weekend ever." No tags, no context, just us. Within an hour, my aunt texted, "Looks like someone's finally moving on." Good. As my personal life improved, so did my work. My boss called me into his office one afternoon and said he was impressed with my recent performance and wanted to recommend me for a senior position that had just opened up. It would mean more responsibility, but also a big salary bump and more control over my schedule, which meant more time with my son. I accepted. When I told my son about the promotion, he cheered and said, "Does that mean we can get more cake?" I laughed harder than I had in weeks. But not everything was quiet. Mom showed up at my house again a few days later, looking exhausted. She said Rachel had been calling her nonstop, crying, saying the venue was about to cancel because the final payment still hadn't been made. Mom begged me to just cover the balance for the sake of peace. I told her calmly that I wasn't involved and wouldn't be helping. She said, "If this wedding falls apart, "Rachel will never forgive you." I said, "Then I guess she won't forgive me." For once, I didn't feel guilty when she left looking disappointed. That night, I sat down at my laptop and finished the last piece of my app. After months of work, I finally hit publish. It went live the next morning, and by the end of the week, it had gained traction, more downloads than I expected, some positive reviews, even a feature on a small tech blog. My confidence grew with every notification. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was building something for me and my son, something no one could take away. And then came the real turning point. A few days later, the venue manager called me directly. She said Rachel had finally called back, but had yelled at the staff and threatened to take her business elsewhere if they didn't give her more time. The manager said she wanted to know if there was another point of contact for the family because she wasn't sure she could keep dealing with Rachel. I thanked her for letting me know and said I wasn't involved, but this time, I didn't hang up right away. I asked a few polite questions about how the payment process worked, what the deadlines were, what would happen if the balance wasn't paid. The manager explained everything patiently, probably thinking I was trying to help. I took careful notes. By the time I hung up, I knew exactly how much time Rachel had left before the booking was canceled. That night, I sat in my office after my son went to bed, staring at those notes. For weeks, I had been quietly rebuilding my life, step by step. Now I was in a position to do something more. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but to finally make it clear that I wasn't their safety net anymore. And as I closed my notebook and turned off the light, I realized something. I wasn't just ready to move on. I was ready to take control of the ending. And Rachel had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was like the fog that had hung over me since my son's ruined birthday had finally burned away, leaving nothing but sharp focus. I knew what I needed to do, not just to protect myself and my son, but to finally draw a line that couldn't be crossed. My first step was subtle. I called the venue manager back, not to interfere, but to ask a few more detailed questions under the guise of being a concerned family member. I asked about the specific payment deadlines, the cancellation policy, and whether they required anything in writing to release the booking if payment wasn't made. She told me that because of Rachel's behavior, they were already considering terminating the contract. She sounded almost relieved that someone in the family was being polite and professional for once. I thanked her and asked if she would be willing to copy me on all future correspondence regarding the booking, just so there's no miscommunication. She agreed, probably assuming I'd be the mediator. And just like that, I had a direct line to every development, every deadline, every official warning. With that information in hand, I started to prepare. I didn't tell anyone what I knew, not my parents, not my aunt, not even my closest friend. I kept my replies to family messages short and polite, never giving them anything they could twist into a fight. The calmer I was, the more desperate they seemed to become. Rachel sent another text a few days later, saying, "You can still fix this before it's too late." I didn't reply. Instead, I began documenting everything. Every message, every email, every call log. I even saved the voicemail Mom left where she admitted they had taken my son's college fund for the greater good. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about building a record, proof that I wasn't the villain they were painting me to be. In the meantime, my work promotion came through officially. My new salary hit my account for the first time, and it felt like validation for every long night. Every time I'd put in extra effort while Rachel coasted through life. With my finances more secure than ever, I opened a dedicated education trust for my son. This time, no one but me had access. The more I strengthened my own position, the more the power dynamic began to shift. At the same time, I started to notice cracks forming in Rachel's carefully curated image. One afternoon, I ran into a mutual acquaintance, a florist I'd worked with on a charity event, who mentioned that Rachel had stopped by her shop looking for last-minute arrangements but had been rude and demanding. The florist said Rachel had complained loudly that she couldn't find anyone competent to work with her. Apparently, word was starting to get around in the local event planning community that Rachel was difficult to deal with. That was interesting. I didn't spread rumors. I didn't have to. Rachel was digging her own hole, and all I had to do was step back and let it get deeper. A few days later, the venue manager sent a formal notice. If payment was not received by the end of the month, the booking would be canceled and the deposit forfeited. I knew Rachel hadn't made the payment because she'd been too busy complaining about how unfair it was that she had to pay anything at all. This time, I didn't just sit on the information. I printed the notice out and put it in a folder with all my other documentation. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I wanted to be ready when the time came. Then something unexpected happened. Mom called and asked if she could come over alone, without Dad. When she arrived, she looked tired, older somehow. She sat down at my table and said, "I don't know what to do with your sister anymore. She's out of control." It was the first time I had heard her say anything even remotely critical of Rachel. She admitted that Rachel had maxed out 2 credit cards paying for things she didn't actually need for the wedding and had started asking Mom and Dad for more money they didn't have. Mom looked at me with watery eyes and said, "I think we made a mistake taking your son's savings. We just wanted to make things easier for her. But it's never enough." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the letter, the threats, the way she had tried to guilt me into paying for Rachel's mess. So I told her calmly that she had a chance to make things right. She could start by talking to Rachel and making her apologize, not just to me, but to my son. And she could replace the money they had taken, even if it took time. Mom nodded slowly, but I could tell she wasn't ready to take that step yet. She said she'd think about it and left. That night, I received another email from the venue manager. This time, Rachel had missed a scheduled call entirely. The manager was clearly fed up and said this was her final courtesy notice before cancellation. It was like watching a storm roll in from a distance, knowing exactly when and where it was going to hit. I decided it was time to make my own move, quietly, carefully. I wrote a short, professional email to the venue thanking them for keeping me informed and letting them know that if the booking was canceled, I would be happy to discuss alternative arrangements for a future event. I didn't specify what event, just left the door open. It wasn't a promise. It was a seed. And while that seed was planted, I focused on my own life more than ever. My app started gaining serious traction, enough that a small investor reached out to me about potential funding. I found myself on calls with people who were excited about what I'd built, who respected me for what I could bring to the table. Meanwhile, my son was thriving. His teacher told me he'd become more confident, more engaged in class. At home, he laughed more, asked more questions, seemed lighter somehow. It was like we were both breathing easier now that we weren't constantly under the shadow of my family's drama. And then, just when things were starting to settle into this new rhythm, Rachel showed up again, this time furious. She pounded on my door until I opened it and stormed past me into the house. "The venue says they're going to cancel if I don't pay by Friday," she said, throwing her hands up. "You need to fix this. Call them. Tell them you'll cover it. Do whatever you have to do." I didn't answer right away. I just watched her pace around my kitchen, ranting about how unfair it was that weddings were so expensive, how ridiculous it was that she was expected to pay on time. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I said, very calmly, "I'm not going to fix this for you. Not this time." Her mouth fell open. "You're serious?" "Yes." She glared at me for a long time, then said something that confirmed what I already knew. "If this wedding gets canceled, it's on you." She stormed out before I could reply, leaving the door open behind her. I closed it slowly, locked it, and stood there in the quiet. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when they all made it clear that they weren't going to stop pushing until I pushed back. And for the first time in my life, I was ready, really ready, to push back in a way they would never forget. Because now I had the information, the leverage, and the calm, deliberate patience to use it. And when the deadline came, I wouldn't just be a spectator. I would be the one holding the final card. Friday morning came with a strange kind of stillness. I woke up before my alarm, made coffee, and stood by the kitchen window as the sun came up. I could feel it, this quiet, steady anticipation humming under my skin. Today was the deadline. The day everything came due, literally and figuratively. I sat down at my desk and opened my email. Right on schedule. There it was, the final notice from the venue, stating that if payment was not received by 5 p.m., the booking would be canceled and the deposit forfeited. They had CC'd me, as I had requested, which meant I had it in writing. I didn't reply right away. I let the clock tick for a few hours while I focused on work, taking calls and answering messages, all the while feeling this calm, methodical energy building inside me. Around noon, my phone started lighting up with texts from Mom. "Jason, Please, just talk to your sister. The venue says this is the last chance. Don't let her big day be ruined. Then from Dad, step up. Be a man. Handle this. And finally, Rachel herself. You have until 5. If you don't pay, don't bother coming to the wedding or talking to me ever again. I almost laughed at that one. The threat wasn't really a threat. It was a promise. At 4:45 p.m., I opened my laptop and drafted one simple, professional email to the venue manager. Thank you for keeping me informed. I understand today is the final deadline for payment on the booking under Rachel. If payment is not received and the contract is terminated, please let me know as soon as possible. I would like to discuss reserving the venue for a future private event on a different date. I sent it, closed my laptop, and went outside to play soccer with my son until the sun dipped below the horizon. When we came back inside, there was a new email waiting for me. Dear Jason, as of 5 p.m. today, no payment has been received from Rachel. The booking has been canceled in accordance with the contract terms, and the deposit has been forfeited. Please let us know if you would like to discuss a reservation for a future date. Best regards, venue manager. I felt this wave of quiet satisfaction wash over me. Not gloating, not petty, just final. That night, I posted a picture on social media of me and my son eating ice cream on the couch with a caption that simply said, "Good day." Within an hour, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then another from Dad. Ignored. Then a barrage of texts from Rachel, each one angrier than the last. Are you happy now? You ruined my wedding. You're disgusting. You'll regret this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called the venue the next morning. I spoke to the manager directly and arranged to reserve the same date, but not for a wedding, for a private celebration dinner. I didn't give details, just locked it in and paid the deposit myself. Then I sent one single message to the family group chat. Since the venue was already booked for that day, I figured I'd use it. You're welcome to come if you can be civil. The chat went silent for almost an hour. Then my aunt replied with a single shocked emoji. Mom finally called. This time, I answered. She started crying immediately, saying Rachel was inconsolable, that this would destroy her reputation. I stayed calm and told her that this was never about destroying anything. It was about finally showing them that I wasn't their safety net anymore. I reminded her of what she had said about taking my son's college fund for the greater good, and asked if she still thought that was fair now that it had come to this. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, Jason, you can't really go through with hosting your own event that day. It'll humiliate her. I told her that Rachel's humiliation wasn't my responsibility, just like her wedding wasn't mine to save. And then I hung up. Over the next few days, I finalized my plans. Nothing flashy, just a simple dinner for me, my son, and a few close friends who had been my real support system through this mess. People who actually showed up for us. I arranged for a custom cake to be made, a dinosaur cake, just like the one that had been thrown away at my son's party. When the day finally came, it felt almost surreal. I got texts from a few relatives saying they wouldn't be attending because it wouldn't be appropriate after what happened to Rachel. Fine. The people who mattered were there. We arrived at the venue early, and as soon as my son saw the cake, his eyes lit up. You got it back, he shouted. Better than before, I said, handing him the first slice. We spent the evening laughing, eating, and enjoying ourselves in a way I didn't think was possible just a few months ago. And as I watched my son blow out the candles on the cake, months late, but no less special, I realized that this was what I had been fighting for all along. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but peace. Halfway through the dinner, I got a notification on my phone. Rachel had posted on social media about the most painful day of her life, saying how she had been betrayed by her own brother. The comments were full of sympathy, but also questions about why she hadn't paid her own venue bill. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to. The people who mattered were right there in the room with me, smiling and eating cake. And Rachel's perfect day? That had been built on taking from us, and now it was gone. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't done either. Because there was still one last thing I needed to do before I could finally close this chapter for good. The days after my little celebration were oddly quiet, like the air right after a storm. My phone barely buzzed, except for the occasional passive-aggressive message from relatives who clearly didn't know the whole story but wanted me to make amends. I ignored them. Then, on Monday morning, everything exploded. My cousin sent me a screenshot of Rachel's social media. She had posted a long, emotional rant about how her wedding had been stolen from her by someone who was supposed to be family. It was 3 paragraphs of vague accusations about betrayal and sabotage, ending with, "Some people would rather see me miserable than happy." Normally, the comments on Rachel's posts were full of supportive friends gassing her up. Not this time. People were asking questions. Wait, didn't you have like a year to pay off the venue? Why would your brother be responsible for your wedding bill? Didn't your parents give you money for this already? By the afternoon, Rachel had turned off comments entirely. Later that day, Mom called me, her voice hoarse from crying. She said Rachel had been humiliated, that she had friends dropping out of her bridal party, that the vendors were refusing to work with her because of unprofessional behavior. She said Rachel wasn't leaving the house, that she'd been crying nonstop. I listened quietly, then asked if Rachel had apologized to my son yet. There was a long pause before Mom said, "She's not ready to do that." "Then there's nothing to talk about," I said, and hung up. That night, Dad showed up at my house unannounced. He stood on my porch with his jaw tight, holding something in his hand, a check. He said it was the full amount they had taken from my son's savings. "Consider it paid back," he said gruffly. I asked if Rachel knew they were doing this. He said no, that she still thought she deserved that money. I took the check, but I didn't invite him in. I told him that money would be going directly into my son's education trust, and that from now on, there would be no more shared family funds. Dad didn't argue. For once, he just nodded and left. The next morning, I got an email from the venue manager. She thanked me again for being such a pleasure to work with and said if I ever wanted to book another event, they'd be happy to offer me a discount for being a respectful client. I laughed when I read it, not out of spite, but because it felt like the universe was putting a stamp on the whole ordeal, a quiet acknowledgement that I had chosen the high road, even if my family couldn't see it. Weeks passed. My app kept growing, my son kept thriving, and my house felt calmer than ever. Rachel, on the other hand, went radio silent. I heard through the grapevine that she had tried to rebook another venue for a much smaller ceremony, but several vendors had blacklisted her after the way she treated them. Apparently, she ended up getting married at the courthouse with just Mom and Dad present. No invitations were sent to me, and honestly, I was fine with that. One Saturday afternoon, a few months later, I was at the park with my son when I saw Mom walking toward us. She looked tired but softer somehow. She said Rachel had finally moved on, but that she still refused to talk to me. Then she did something I didn't expect. She crouched down to my son's level, looked him in the eye, and said, "I'm sorry your birthday was ruined. That should never have happened." My son blinked at her for a moment, then said, "It's okay. Dad got me a better cake." Mom's eyes filled with tears. She stood up, looked at me, and said, "I hope one day you and your sister can work this out." I told her, calmly but firmly, "Maybe, but not if it means going back to the way things were." She nodded. For the first time, I think she understood that I wasn't bluffing, that I had built a life outside of their chaos and wasn't going to give that up. As she walked away, my son tugged on my sleeve and said, "Dad, can we go get another cake today?" "Just because." I smiled, picked him up, and said, "Yeah, buddy, let's make it a tradition." And as we walked back to the car, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't dreading the next family gathering, the next phone call, the next demand. Because I finally understood something that had taken me 32 years to learn. Peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else happy. It comes from choosing yourself, even when it makes everyone else uncomfortable. And I was done being uncomfortable. That night, I locked the check away in the safe, tucked my son into bed, and sat quietly in the living room with the lights off, feeling lighter than I had in years. Rachel might never forgive me. Mom might never fully get over it. The family might still whisper behind my back at holidays. But my son would grow up knowing that his father never let anyone throw away what mattered to him. Not his cake, not his future, not his dignity. And that, more than anything, felt like winning. It was a Tuesday when the text came through. Just 3 words. "We all agreed." At first, I wasn't sure what it meant, but the pit in my stomach already knew. A minute later, my phone buzzed again, and this time it was a full sentence, sent by my mom. "We all agreed. You're not welcome at the wedding." No punctuation, just that smug little dash she always used when she wanted to sound formal. A smirk in text form. I stared at the message, rereading it like the words might somehow change if I blinked hard enough. But they didn't. My sister's wedding. The one I helped pay for. The one I helped plan. The one where I'd spent months putting out emotional fires, listening to crying fits, and booking every vendor because my sister, Sarah, was too stressed to deal with it. The same Sarah who, 2 weeks ago, called me her emotional rock, while I wired over another $1,500 for centerpieces that looked like Pinterest threw up on a florist. My name's Kyle. I'm 31. And up until that message, I thought I was doing something good, being the glue that held things together for a family that always seemed just one missed call away from falling apart. I'm not rich, not by any means, but I've worked in IT long enough to put some money away. I've lived modestly, stayed single, and saved while everyone else splurged and borrowed. For years, I thought that meant I was blessed, and they were just unlucky. Turns out, being the responsible one just makes you the family ATM with no overdraft protection. The wedding was supposed to be next Saturday. A beachside venue on the coast, with a ridiculous ivory and gold theme my sister insisted was classy, but looked more like a royal baby shower. I paid for half the venue deposit, booked the flights, even reserved the honeymoon suite in Cabo under my name because my mom's credit wasn't good enough to secure the reservation. And now, I wasn't welcome. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my laptop and quietly logged into the travel portal I'd used for the honeymoon flights. 2 round-trip tickets, business class, under my email. I clicked cancel and watched the screen blink for a second before the $3,800 refund notification popped up. Then I went into my savings account and initiated a transfer, $6,500, the exact amount I had wired to my mom last month for what she claimed was wedding overflow costs. I didn't say a word to anyone, just watched the numbers move. I felt nothing, not anger, not even sadness, just a strange sort of calm, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. The first call came at 8:17 p.m. It was my sister. I let it ring. Then came my cousin, then my uncle, then mom. I turned off notifications and went about my night, reheating leftovers and watching a documentary I didn't absorb a second of. By morning, there were 23 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and a single message that made my hand go cold. Please call me. It's Dad. That stopped me. My dad usually stays out of the chaos. He's a quiet man, the kind who'd rather tinker with a busted coffee maker than get involved in family drama. When I was a kid, I used to think he didn't care. As I got older, I realized it wasn't that. He just picked his battles carefully. And for him to step into this one, something was off. But before I could process it, the voicemail started playing in my head, echoing even though I hadn't hit play. I imagined Sarah's whiny tone, Mom's theatrical sobbing, maybe a guilt-laced message from an aunt who hadn't texted me in 2 years. I wanted to delete them all. I really did. But that one message, from Dad, lingered. This didn't come out of nowhere. It started small. A sideways comment here. A joke there. Last Christmas, Mom said, "Well, at least Sarah will give us grandkids." Not everyone can say that. At the time, I laughed it off. I've never wanted kids, and I'm okay with that. But it stung in a way I didn't admit. Then, during Sarah's engagement dinner, I noticed I wasn't seated at the main table. Just to keep things even, Mom had said. But my younger cousin's boyfriend, who'd only been around for 3 months, was seated next to the groom. I swallowed that one too. Like always. They were always little paper cuts, never big enough to justify a confrontation. Until suddenly, they were. After Sarah got engaged, everything became an emergency. Mom called me in a panic over cake samples. Sarah had meltdowns about bridesmaid dresses. I was expected to cover whatever the groom's family didn't. And I did, because I thought helping meant belonging. I thought showing up with my wallet was how I proved I mattered. But it never bought me a seat. It just made me the unpaid intern of their fantasy wedding. And now I wasn't even invited. I sat on the edge of my bed that morning, my laptop still open, the email confirmation of the canceled flights glowing like a quiet middle finger. I scrolled through the missed calls, each name a little louder than the last. Then I got to the message from Dad. Just 6 words. "You need to see this now." That's when my stomach dropped. I stared at the message from Dad, my thumb hovering over the screen. "You need to see this now." 6 words, but they carried the weight of something heavier than guilt. My father has always been a man of few words, but every one of them is measured. He's not dramatic like Mom, not manipulative like Sarah, and definitely not the type to panic. So if he said I needed to see something, it wasn't going to be another teary voicemail or passive-aggressive family group chat post. I called him. He picked up before the second ring. "Kyle," he said, voice low. "You got a minute?" "Yeah," I said, and suddenly my mouth was dry. "What's going on?" There was a pause. I could hear the muffled thrum of a television in the background, then the volume clicked off. "I didn't know they were going to do that. Your mom and your sister. I just found out this morning, after they locked down the seating chart and made the announcement in the family group chat." "I'm not even in the group chat," I muttered, more to myself than him. "I know," he replied quietly. "That's part of it." Another pause. Then he said, "Kyle, they told everyone you chose not to come." That hit me harder than I expected. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "What?" "They said you were pulling one of your loner stunts. That you got upset over something minor and backed out. Sarah told the family you were always a bit dramatic, and this time you went too far. That you didn't want to be there." I laughed, sharp, bitter, humorless. "So they kicked me out and made it my decision?" "Worse," he said. "Your mom said you threatened to ruin the wedding if you came." That knocked the breath out of me. "She what?" Dad sighed, like he didn't want to be the one saying this. "She told Sarah's in-laws you were emotionally unstable, still bitter about being single, and that you were jealous of your sister's happy ending. Said you were making everything about you, like usual." "Like usual?" My voice cracked. I had to stand up. My apartment suddenly felt like it was shrinking. "I know, son," Dad said quickly. "I know that's not who you are. I've watched you pick up every piece they dropped. You handled that entire engagement party, and no one thanked you. You paid off Mom's second credit card last summer without saying a word. You showed up every time they didn't. But they don't see that. Or maybe they do, and it threatens them." I leaned against the kitchen counter, my hands shaking. "So this whole thing, this exile, was a setup? To make me the bad guy?" Dad hesitated. Then, with an exhale, said, "It's worse than that. They already started telling people you refused to fund the honeymoon out of spite." That's when I knew something had changed in me. Something broke, but not in the way I thought it would. I wasn't hurt anymore. I wasn't even angry. I felt detached, cold, like I was watching a rerun of a show I used to care about but now knew all the plot twists too. "They took the money, Dad," I said flatly. $6,500 wired to Mom's account for the honeymoon. I canceled the flights last night. The refund's already back in my account." He was silent for a moment. Then, softly, "Good." It was the first time in years my father had supported one of my decisions that openly. He wasn't a man of grand gestures, but that one word meant everything. Then he added, "There's something else. I wasn't going to tell you, but I think you need to see it." I heard rustling on the other end, then the ping of a message coming through. I opened my phone. It was a screenshot. A group chat, Mom, Sarah, and a few of the aunts. My name was mentioned in the thread. Mom texted, "Don't worry about Kyle. He's just sensitive because no one's ever loved him enough to marry him. I'll talk to him after the wedding, once he realizes how childish he's being." Sarah texted, "He's a ghost. Let him fade. Just need to make sure he doesn't embarrass us." And Cheryl texted, "So we're agreed. No +1 for him even if he begs?" Mom texted, "Exactly. No seat, no speech, no drama. He'll get over it. He always does." I read the messages twice, then a third time, and then I deleted them, not out of denial, but because I didn't need to see them again to know the truth. I'd always been an outsider in my own family. The helper, the fixer, the invisible glue. But glue doesn't get a seat at the table, it just holds everything else together while it cracks. And they were right about one thing. I wasn't going to beg. That evening, I sat down and began making a list, not of people to confront, but of systems to dismantle. They wanted me to fade quietly. But they'd forgotten something. I was the one holding the strings. The joint Costco membership with Mom? Canceled. The Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus family plans? Removed their profiles. The auto payments I'd been quietly making on Sarah's student loan? Disabled. And the best part, the venue deposit for the wedding? Still under my name. Technically, I was the primary contract holder. They'd never paid me back for that check I wrote to lock in the date. I'd been meaning to deal with that paperwork later. No, it was at the top of my list. As I stared at the contract, hovering over the cancel reservation option, I smiled for the first time that day. Because if they thought I was dramatic before, they hadn't seen anything yet. By Wednesday morning, the silence from my end had them spiraling. The voicemails went from passive-aggressive to desperate. Sarah's tone morphed with every message, first annoyed, then pleading. Kyle, can we talk? I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Mom didn't mean it that way. I didn't respond. I listened with my arms crossed, each new message only confirming what I already knew. They were trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it was far too late for that. But I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of ego. This wasn't about lashing out. This was about letting go and making sure they felt it. That afternoon, I sat down with a black notebook and started writing out every account, every auto payment, every password-protected bill I had my name attached to. I wasn't dramatic. I was thorough. The irony? They called me the cold one, the robot, the one who didn't feel things like the rest of us. They were right in a way. I didn't blow up. I didn't scream. I calculated. I logged in. Mom's phone plan, which I'd been paying for since 2019 when she got laid off. Suspended. She wouldn't even notice until she tried to make a call during her hair trial on Friday. Sarah's Venmo, which was connected to my bank as a backup card from when she overdrafted 3 times during college and never figured out how to remove it. Unlinked. And then I reported the suspicious charges on my account just for fun. Fraud protection is a beautiful thing. By Thursday morning, I had an email from the wedding venue. A polite but firm confirmation. Your cancellation request has been received. Per the contract, your deposit will be forfeited unless a replacement booking is secured. I smiled. Let them explain that to the 118 guests flying in for a Saturday ceremony that suddenly didn't have a legal reservation. Around noon, my cousin Mark called. He's the only one who ever treated me like a person, not a tool. His voice was tired. Kyle, what's happening? I didn't lie. I'm done funding a family that sees me as a wallet with legs. He sighed. They're freaking out. Good. Sarah's having a meltdown. She's saying you're ruining her marriage. I gave a dry laugh. If a canceled flight and a frozen honeymoon fund ruins a marriage, maybe it wasn't built to last. He didn't argue. He just said, I wish you'd told me sooner. I always knew they leaned on you too much. That night, I opened my laptop again and logged into my dad's old Dropbox account, the one we used when I helped him digitize all the family records a few years back. Inside was a goldmine of scanned receipts, emails, even the original invoice from the engagement party that I paid for but Mom conveniently forgot. I covered. I created a new Google Drive folder, uploaded everything, and titled it Contributions from Kyle Nobody Wanted. Then I copied the link and sent it to every family member on the group thread. I didn't write a caption. I didn't need one. Less than 5 minutes later, I was kicked out of the family chat. Perfect. But the real turn came Friday morning, the day before the wedding. I was sipping coffee, enjoying the quiet, when I got an email from the groom's mother, Linda. We'd met once. She was kind, poised, and very by the book. The kind of woman who kept her silverware aligned and said darling instead of sweetie. Her message was short, but it rattled me more than any voicemail. Subject, concern about the wedding. Hi Kyle, I wanted to reach out directly. I've heard bits and pieces about what's going on, and quite frankly, I'm alarmed. If you have a moment, could we speak? I feel like I'm missing some very important information. Best, Linda. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just family gossip anymore. This was a thread unraveling from both ends. I called her. She answered immediately. Thank you for calling, she said, formal but with an edge of concern. I don't mean to overstep, but my son just informed me that the venue may have been canceled. It was, I said plainly. I paid the deposit. It was under my name. She was quiet for a second. That's not what we were told. I'm sure. Another pause. She cleared her throat. Kyle, I don't know what's been said, but I was told you declined to come. That you'd backed out because you were bitter. I let the silence hang, then asked, do bitter people usually pay for floral arrangements, the wedding cake, the DJ, and half the venue? Linda inhaled sharply. I was unaware of any of that. Of course you were. They needed someone to blame when I pulled out. And when I stopped funding it, they made sure to do what they always do, point the finger at me. Her voice lowered. I understand now why you've distanced yourself. I would have too. But, Kyle, there's something you should know. Sarah, she opened a joint credit card with your mom last week. And she used your name on the application. I froze. What? They claimed you co-signed. My husband caught it when we reviewed the final expenses. He recognized your name on the paperwork. That was it. That was the part that changed everything. I wasn't just the family ATM anymore. I was a target. I sat there, my coffee suddenly cold in my hand, the room closing in around me as Linda's words echoed in my ear. They claimed you co-signed. I hadn't. Not even close. I've always been careful about credit. Guarded, even. After watching mom default on a car loan in my early 20s and drag her credit into the basement with mine tethered behind it, because yes, she had convinced me to co-sign that, I'd spent the better part of a decade fixing my financial reputation. I knew better. I hadn't signed anything for this wedding outside of what I paid for directly. Do you have a copy of the application? I asked Linda, my voice calm but clipped. I do, she said. Would you like me to send it to you? Immediately, please. A few minutes later, it landed in my inbox. There it was, staring back at me. An application for a high-limit wedding credit card with a forged digital signature. My name, address, social security number, even my old work email, probably lifted from tax forms or bank records they still had lying around. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. All these years, I'd been the fallback plan. The fixer. The silent financier. But forging my name? That wasn't desperation. That was entitlement soaked in fraud. That was theft. And it was the final straw. I filed a fraud report with the credit card company. Took screenshots of every detail. Then I filed a police report. I attached the documentation, the forged application, and a notarized statement of non-consent. Then I picked up my phone, and for the first time since Mom's smug message that started all this, I called her. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. Kyle, she said, her voice overly cheerful. I was just about to call you. Stop, I said, flat. I just want to hear it from you. Did you sign my name on a credit card application? Silence. Kyle, you're being ridiculous. That was just a backup in case the honeymoon ran over. You know how these things go. Did you sign my name? A long pause. Then, Sarah said you would have done it if you knew it was important. I let that hang there like a guillotine. That's not an answer, I said, my voice cold. But it's fine. You can explain it to the investigator when they call. That cracked her mask. What? Are you serious? Kyle, we're family. You're really going to make this ugly over a little misunderstanding? Mom, I said, cutting her off. You kicked me out of a wedding I paid for, lied to everyone about it, and committed fraud in my name. I didn't make this ugly. You did. I'm just putting it in the light where it belongs. Kyle, honey, please, we can fix this. I hung up. That evening, I drove to my dad's place. He was waiting for me on the porch with 2 beers and that silent, weathered look he always wore when things got heavy. You okay? He asked as I sat beside him. I nodded slowly. Getting there. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He just handed me the beer and we watched the sun dip below the trees. Eventually, he said, you did the right thing. And somehow, that meant more than anything. The fallout came fast. First came the phone calls from family, my aunts, my cousins, even Uncle Greg, who hadn't spoken to me since 2016. They all wanted to know what was really going on, why the wedding was off, why Sarah had posted a cryptic Instagram story about being betrayed by blood. I didn't respond. Then came the texts, the apologies, the guilt trips. Kyle, I had no idea. We should have stood up for you. Can we please talk? But I was done being their emotional janitor. I let the calls go to voicemail, let the texts sit unread. As for the wedding, it never happened. With the venue canceled and no backup secured, they tried to pivot to a backyard ceremony. But the guests were confused, some turned around mid-flight, and the groom's family, having learned about the forged credit card, called the whole thing off. Apparently, financial fraud before the vows isn't a great look. Sarah went on a posting spree. Cryptic stories, Bible verses, passive-aggressive quotes about snakes in the grass, and family who turns their back on you. I didn't flinch. Because here's the thing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's not yelling or exposing someone in front of a crowd. Sometimes it's just clarity, quietly dismantling the system that took you for granted. Walking away while the whole rotten house collapses behind you. About a week later, I got a final message from Mom. You've made your point. We're all hurting. You didn't have to go this far. I didn't reply. Instead, I changed my number. I took a few days off work and booked a trip, solo, just me and my laptop, on the same resort Sarah was supposed to honeymoon at. Funny thing about being the one who booked everything under your name, you know the cancellation policies. I changed the dates, upgraded the suite, took her champagne package and added it to my reservation. And I sat on that balcony, drink in hand, waves rolling beneath me, thinking about how long I'd waited for someone to see me. But I finally saw myself. Not the version they needed me to be. Not the fixer. Not the bank account. Just Kyle. 31, free, and finally, done trying to earn love I never owed them in the first place. I don't know if they'll ever really understand what they lost. But I do. And I'm not giving it back. My name's Tyler. I'm 26, and if I could summarize my family in one sentence, it would be, image matters more than integrity. That sounds dramatic, I know. But if you've ever had a mom who cared more about what the neighbors thought than your mental health, or a sibling who could do no wrong even while doing everything wrong, you'd get it. My family isn't abusive exactly. They're just performative. Polished smiles, carefully chosen words, holiday cards that look like Hallmark threw up. But scratch just a little beneath the surface and it's all ego, judgment, and appearances. I've always been the odd one out. I was the quiet kid with a head full of ideas, more comfortable building websites or tweaking Python scripts than socializing at church brunch. I got a full ride for computer science and spent 4 years quietly working on a side project I never told anyone about. Long story short, that project blew up post-graduation. Think software licensing deal, modest exit, decent investments. Nothing wild. No yachts or Teslas, but enough that I could freelance when I wanted, travel a bit, live well under the radar. And that's exactly how I liked it. My family, however, assumed I was still trying to figure things out. My mom would drop comments like, "You'll find your calling soon," even after I bought a house outright. My sister? Don't get me started. Her name's Brielle, 28, beauty pageant alumni, studied communications, and married her college sweetheart at 23. When that marriage crashed and burned last year, something about irreconcilable ambition differences, her words, she moved back home for a while. That's when things started getting weird. Suddenly, Brielle was this whirlwind of self-reinvention. New hair, new wardrobe, new Instagram aesthetic, and eventually a new boyfriend. His name? Brad. Because of course it was. He looked like someone who'd be named Brad. Tall, tanned, manicured beard, probably uses the phrase alpha energy in earnest. But here's the kicker, my family loved him. My mom gushed over him like she was auditioning to be his publicist. "He's very successful in finance," she said, sipping her wine one night as if she understood what that meant. My dad, who usually doesn't get involved, just nodded and added, "He carries himself well." I met him briefly once at my parents' place, just a handshake and a "yo man, what's up" kind of thing, but I kept my distance. Something about him just didn't sit right. Too slick, too rehearsed. And the way Brielle looked at him? Not love. Performance. Like she wanted us all to see her leveling up. I kept my mouth shut, smiled politely, and went back to my place. I figured he'd fade out eventually like all her other passion projects. I was wrong. A week ago, I got a text from my mom. "Family dinner Sunday at 6. Be there. Brielle's bringing Brad." No emoji, no please. Just a commandment. Typical. I thought about skipping. It's not like I'd be missed, but something about the way she phrased it got under my skin. Like it wasn't a request, but an obligation. Like my role was to show up, smile, and let them feel good about being the perfect family. Against my better judgment, I went. Sunday came, and I showed up 10 minutes late just to mess with the vibe. My mom opened the door, perfectly lipsticked, and gave me a look like I'd just walked in wearing rags. "Tyler," she sighed. We were about to start. No hug, no hello. I just nodded and stepped inside. The table was already set. Crystal glasses, cloth napkins, my mom's signature overcooked roast, and everyone else was seated. Dad at the head, sipping scotch. Brielle next to him, all dolled up. And then Brad, lounging back like he owned the place. "Yo, what's up, bro?" he said with that punchable grin. "Nice of you to finally show up." I smiled thinly. "Traffic." He snorted. "Right. In this town." My mom cleared her throat and waved me to my seat like a stage director pushing the last actor on stage. We made small talk for a bit. How's work, the weather, some news about a cousin I barely remembered. And for a while, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Then the joke started. Brad launched into some story about a coworker who tried to start a side hustle. Dude thought he was going to be the next Zuckerberg, he laughed. Made like $5 and called himself an entrepreneur. Everyone chuckled. My mom laughed the loudest. Brielle even wiped a fake tear. I didn't say anything, but Brad looked right at me, like he wanted to see if I'd take the bait. "You ever try anything like that, Tyler? I heard you're into that tech stuff." I shrugged. "A bit." He smirked. You should talk to this guy I know. He teaches coding to high schoolers. Pretty solid gig for folks who can't break into real development jobs. Brielle laughed. Ouch, Brad. But she didn't defend me. She just sipped her wine. I glanced at my mom. Nothing. Not even a twitch. So I smiled. Sounds like a great fallback for someone like you. His smirk twitched, but he played it off. Nah man, I'm good. I'm in finance. You know, real-world stuff. My dad chuckled. We could use a little more of that around here. That stung. It shouldn't have, but it did. I'd helped him set up a budgeting app just last year. Literally automated half his finances. But sure, Brad, Mr. Finance Guy, was the real deal. I stayed quiet for the rest of the meal. Let them bask in their smug little echo chamber. But inside, my mind was spinning. I knew something they didn't. Something Brad definitely didn't want them to know. Because earlier that week, on pure instinct, I'd Googled him. Just one of those hunches I couldn't ignore. And what I found? Well, let's just say his definition of finance was a little more flexible than most. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I waited. I let them talk. And then, right after dessert, Brad opened his mouth again. And that's when everything shifted. But I'll get to that. You know that feeling when you're sitting at a table and everyone's laughing at something, but it's not funny to you? Not even remotely. It's not just that you don't get the joke. It's that you are the joke. And everyone knows it, and they're fine with it. That was me, sitting there, picking at a piece of dry roast beef, while Brad practically held court like he was some motivational speaker hosting a family TED Talk. And they ate it up. Brielle was clinging to every word like he was reading out stock tips straight from heaven. My dad leaned in every time Brad spoke, nodding like a bobblehead. And my mom? She had that glassy-eyed look she used to reserve for country club ladies with doctor husbands. I just sat there, mostly quiet, watching it unfold like a spectator at my own humiliation. So anyway, Brad said, patting his stomach and pushing his plate forward like a satisfied king. Our firm's launching a new algorithmic fund next quarter. Real cutting-edge stuff. You wouldn't believe the amount of back-end work I've had to oversee. Back-end work? I asked mildly, twirling my fork between my fingers. He glanced at me. Yeah, quantitative models, predictive analytics, finance nerd stuff, you know. He chuckled like he'd just told a good joke. Oh sure, I said. Sounds complex. It is, he said. You ever think about getting into real business? Or is the dream still coding in your pajamas and drinking Red Bull at 2 a.m.? Brielle laughed like that was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Brad, stop, she said, though she clearly didn't want him to. Tyler's always been more of a passion project kind of guy. My mom didn't laugh this time. She gave me the look. That tight-lipped, passive-aggressive mom look that could suck the air out of a room. Tyler, she said, we've talked about this. You have to let people tease you sometimes. It's how we connect. I blinked. Tease, or belittle? Her tone hardened. Don't make a scene. And there it was. The line I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. Don't make a scene. Translation, don't make us look bad. Don't make us uncomfortable. Don't disrupt the illusion. I leaned back in my chair. Didn't realize being mocked at dinner counted as bonding. Brad raised an eyebrow. It's all in good fun, man. No need to get defensive. I didn't respond. I just stared at him, long enough that his confident smirk faltered for a split second. Then my dad broke the tension. All right, let's move on. Tyler, you doing anything interesting these days? I knew he didn't actually care. It was a lifeline disguised as small talk, a way to neutralize the moment. Working on a few projects, I said vaguely. Keeping busy. Brad snorted again, his default setting, apparently. What kind of projects? Or is that top secret? I looked at him. He didn't blink. He was trying to humiliate me. Again. Before I could say anything, my mom sighed. Loudly. Like I was the problem. Tyler, please, she said in that disappointed teacher voice. Can we not do this tonight? You're making things awkward. I froze. Everyone turned their eyes toward me. I was making things awkward. Not Brad, who'd been goading me nonstop. Not Brielle, who giggled through every jab like it was open mic night at a comedy club. Me. I felt something in my chest twist. Something familiar and heavy and bitter. The same feeling I used to get in high school when Brielle would throw a tantrum over something she did wrong, and I'd get grounded for not being the bigger person. The same feeling I had when I got a full scholarship to a school 3 states away and my mom said, "You'll change your mind, sweetie. You don't want to leave your family, do you?" Like I was selfish for wanting a life of my own. I clenched my jaw. Sure, I said tightly. Let's not make things awkward. The conversation moved on. They joked about mutual friends, vacations, some neighbor's dog. I tuned most of it out. I was barely listening, just nodding when needed, sipping my water, keeping my expression flat. But inside, the storm was building. Because that wasn't just a comment or two. That was years of quiet contempt, wrapped in fake smiles and forced laughter, bubbling up in the open. That was every time I was overlooked, dismissed, told to be quieter, smaller, more agreeable. And now, there was a shiny new golden boy at the table. One who could say whatever he wanted, as long as he looked good doing it. Then came the moment. Dessert had been cleared, store-bought cheesecake my mom pretended she baked, and the wine had done its work. My dad leaned back with a satisfied grunt, and Brielle was scrolling through her phone, showing Brad something on Instagram. So anyway, Brad said suddenly, looking up from her screen, I actually gave a talk last week on fintech disruption. My team's been working with this new predictive analytics firm, StartupStream or something like that. Tiny little dev company, barely anyone's heard of them. They've got good tech, though. We're probably going to buy their platform outright in a few months. I set my glass down. Slowly. StartupStream? I asked. Calm. Even. Yeah, Brad said. You've heard of them? A bit, I said. What's your involvement exactly? He grinned. I'm kind of the guy who does the talking. You know, front-facing. I smooth the deals. Make sure the numbers align. Some of the execs don't like working directly with the code people. Gets too technical. The code people, I repeated deadpan. Yeah, he said, clearly not catching the tone. No offense, but those guys aren't exactly business-minded. Brilliant in their own way, sure, but not cut out for the big table. The big table, I echoed, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me now. Brielle was watching with a nervous smile. My dad looked puzzled. My mom was frowning. Brad kept going. Anyway, we'll probably fold their tools into our infrastructure and maybe hire a few of their devs, if they can keep up. It's a win-win. I didn't say anything for a beat. Just reached slowly into my pocket and pulled out my phone. What are you doing? My mom asked sharply, her tone already accusatory. I ignored her. Opened my email. Scrolled for a moment. Found the one I was looking for. StartupStream, I said. That predictive analytics firm. The one your company is about to buy. Brad raised his eyebrows. Yeah. Cool, I said, holding up the screen. Because I own it. Silence. Dead, heavy, complete silence. The room froze like someone had hit pause on a remote. Brad's smirk melted into confusion. Then something that looked very much like panic. My mom blinked. What are you talking about? I stood up slowly, not raising my voice, not changing my tone. StartupStream is my company. I built it. I licensed our core product to 3 separate hedge funds last year, and one of them is the firm you work for. I've had 3 meetings with your department heads. I didn't recognize your name because you weren't in any of them. Brad was pale now. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Brielle looked like she'd just witnessed a car crash in real time. My dad sat up straighter. Wait, what? I didn't mention it because I knew how it would go, I said. I knew no one would believe me. Just like every time I've tried to share something real, you all treated it like a phase. A joke. Something to roll your eyes at. My mom finally found her voice. You mean to tell me, you own a tech company? Since when? I looked at her. Since 3 years ago. You never said anything. Would it have mattered if I did? I asked. You made your minds up a long time ago. Brad stood now too, his confident energy replaced with something twitchy and uncomfortable. Look, man, I didn't know. Right? I cut in. Because if you did, you wouldn't have said half the things you did tonight. You probably wouldn't have said anything at all. He glanced at Brielle, like she was supposed to save him. She just stared at the table. I looked around one last time. At the room. At the people who were supposed to be my family. There's a special kind of silence that happens when people realize the version of you they built in their heads doesn't match reality. It's not the quiet of reflection or regret. It's the stunned, gaping stillness of ego being rewired in real time. That's what I saw at that table. Brad's jaw tightened. My mom blinked like someone had unplugged her and she was rebooting. Brielle looked at me with this weird cocktail of confusion, embarrassment, and something dangerously close to shame. And my dad? He just sat back like a man watching his house tilt on its foundation. And I was standing there, phone in hand, pulse thudding, heart pounding. Not out of pride. Not even revenge. but from years of pent-up words finally bursting out. From the sheer exhaustion of playing small for people who had never once thought to ask what I was building when I disappeared into my room for hours. They only saw a boy with a laptop, never a man with a plan. I could have dropped everything right then. I could have gone for the throat, explained in excruciating detail just how much Brad didn't know, how his firm had been lowballing us for weeks, how he hadn't even been in the meeting loops. But I didn't, because something inside me, maybe the last splinter of the boy who once tried to please everyone, told me it wasn't worth it. Not right now. So instead, I just said it. The one sentence that made the room implode. I'm selling Startup Stream. The deal closes Friday. My mom gasped. You're what? It's been in the works for months. I signed the papers last week. Brielle blinked. Wait, like, selling? For how much? I looked at her for a long moment. Enough. Brad made a choked noise. To who? I looked at him. To a firm that's not yours. And then I walked out. Didn't wait for dessert. Didn't say goodbye. Just left them sitting in the dining room like mannequins caught mid-conversation. That night, I didn't sleep much. You'd think it'd be cathartic, walking out like that. And part of it was. But there was something else. Something heavier. I kept replaying their faces, their silence, the weight of those years I spent hiding my success because I didn't want to be that guy. The arrogant tech bro. I made it, and now I'm better than you guy. I never wanted to rub anything in anyone's face. But they had no problem rubbing me in the dirt. And now? Now I had nothing left to prove to them. But here's the truth. Walking away doesn't mean you don't carry the bruises. The days after the dinner were oddly quiet. No texts. No calls. Not even a passive-aggressive "let's talk" from my mom. I half expected a guilt trip, or a sudden flood of messages pretending it never happened. But no, just silence, which was fine, at first. But loneliness has this way of echoing louder when it follows disappointment. And I wasn't immune to it. I didn't spiral. I'm not going to pretend I collapsed into a pit of despair. But I felt adrift. Hollow. Like I'd snapped a rubber band that had been stretched for too long and now didn't know what to do with the slack. I buried myself in the sale. The paperwork was brutal. Even with lawyers and consultants, selling a company you built from the ground up is like gutting your own house. Ripping out floorboards, checking every crevice, making sure no rotting beams remain. But it gave me structure, purpose. And then Friday came. Signed the final doc at 10:07 a.m. Got a confirmation ping a minute later. Just like that, it was done. I stared at my laptop screen for a long time. My bank account reflected a number that didn't feel real. Enough zeros to make my high school economics teacher proud. Enough to change my life 10 times over. Enough to disappear if I wanted to. But instead of celebrating, I closed the laptop. And I went for a walk. I ended up at this little coffee shop downtown I used to work at during college. They still made the same burnt espresso. Still had the same wobbly table near the window. I sat there for a good hour, watching people walk by, wondering what came next. That's when the text came. From Brielle. Hey, you around? I stared at it. Considered deleting it. But something in me, curiosity, maybe stupidity, typed back. Yeah. She sent an address. Not our parents' house. Her place. The apartment she'd been crashing in since the divorce. I thought about it for a while. Then paid for my coffee, stood up, and walked there. She answered the door in sweats and a hoodie. No makeup. No performance. Just Brielle. The version I hadn't seen since we were kids sharing cereal in the mornings before school. She didn't say anything for a second. Then, softly, you want to come in? I nodded. Her place was small. Messy. Half-unpacked boxes in the corner. A forgotten wine glass on the counter. She gestured to the couch, and we sat. Look, she started. I didn't know. About the company. About anything. I stayed quiet. She fidgeted with the drawstring of her hoodie. Brad's well. You saw what he's like. I thought he was this stable, confident guy after the divorce. I wanted someone to get me. You know, I raised an eyebrow. So you brought him to dinner to parade him around? Her cheeks flushed. I didn't expect him to be that bad. And I didn't expect you to drop a nuke like that. I didn't plan to, I said honestly. But he kept pushing, and no one stopped him. Brielle sighed. That's kinda how we are, huh? We perform. We keep up appearances. We don't rock the boat. I nodded. Yeah. And the boat's been sinking for years. She didn't respond for a bit. Then, Mom's freaking out. Not just about what happened. About what she missed. She called me yesterday crying. saying she failed you somehow. I almost laughed. Now she notices? She's not great at saying sorry, Brielle admitted. She thinks if she ignores it long enough, it resets. Yeah, that's familiar. I'm not asking you to forgive her, she said. But maybe just talk to her. She's not sleeping. Dad's pretending everything's fine, but I heard him telling Uncle Ray you embarrassed the family. I looked at her. I embarrassed the family? She nodded, wincing. That's the story they're telling themselves? Yeah. Figures. We talked for a while longer. She apologized again. Not performatively this time. It felt real. Human. Vulnerable. And I found myself softening, just a little. Because despite everything, she was my sister. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally starting to see me as more than the family's punching bag. I left without promising anything. I didn't text Mom. I didn't call Dad. Instead, I booked a trip. 2 weeks. No laptop. No work. No family. Just me, a cabin near the coast, and a lot of empty time to figure out what I wanted. And you know what? It was the best thing I ever did. I hiked. I read books. I cooked for myself. I sat on the porch at night and listened to the wind. No judgment. No expectations. Just stillness. And slowly, piece by piece, something inside me started rebuilding. Not with loud declarations or Instagram quotes. Quietly, privately, I started thinking about my next steps. Not for money, not for prestige, but for me. I'd already won the game my family didn't even know I was playing. Now it was time to stop playing for them altogether. By the time I got back, I had a plan. Not for revenge. Not for proving them wrong. For freedom. But, of course, nothing stays quiet for long. Because when I returned, I found a letter waiting for me. No return address. Inside, a wedding invitation. Brielle and Brad. And a little handwritten note from my mom. We hope you'll come. Family is everything. Let's not let one dinner ruin that. I must have read that note 5 times. Let's not let one dinner ruin that. Like it was some tiny hiccup. Like it was a slightly awkward moment to brush under the rug next to all the other things they'd conveniently forgotten. I held the invitation in one hand, the note in the other, and for a second, I just stood there in my hallway, surrounded by silence. The kind of silence that screams. I wasn't angry. Not immediately. What I felt was colder. Clearer. A clean, sharp understanding that the people who were supposed to know me best still didn't know me at all. Family is everything. That was rich. Because if family was everything, maybe they should have started treating me like something. I sat down at the kitchen counter, flicked the invitation open again, and scanned the details. The wedding was 2 months away. Garden ceremony. Formal dress. Dinner and dancing at a boutique hotel about an hour outside the city. RSVP by the end of the month. My name was handwritten on the envelope in my mother's looping cursive, like that somehow made it more personal. Like she hadn't ghosted me for weeks after that dinner, only to resurface now that there were flower arrangements and guest lists to finalize. I set the invitation down and stared at the ceiling. Then I smiled. Not a big, smug grin, just a quiet one. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Not bitterness. Not sadness. Leverage. They wanted me at that wedding. Badly. Not because they missed me, or because they'd suddenly had some revelation about how terribly they'd treated me. No. They wanted the image. The illusion. They wanted to be able to tell their church friends, oh yes, the whole family was there. Tyler too. They wanted me to play the part. Wear the suit. Shake hands. Pretend everything was fine so their house of cards didn't collapse. And I had no intention of giving them that. Not for free. The next few days were productive in a way I hadn't felt since the early startup stream days. I don't know if it was the spite or the clarity, but I woke up every morning with a sense of purpose. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving, planning, positioning. Step 1. Information. I didn't trust Brad. That was a given. But something about the way he'd fumbled at dinner, the way he'd tried to spin his involvement with Startup Stream, it didn't sit right with me. So I started digging. At first, I kept it surface level. LinkedIn, Twitter, old company websites. The usual. But Brad was smarter than I'd initially assumed. His digital footprint was carefully managed. Polished. Curated. He looked like a dream candidate on paper. But I'd been in tech long enough to know how easy it is to fake it when you know which buzzwords to use. So I called a friend. Well, not so much a friend as an old contact. Ethan, a cybersecurity guy I'd worked with on a project 2 years back. He owed me a favor. You want me to background a finance bro? He said, amused. I want to know who I'm dealing with, I replied. And I want it off the books. 2 days later, he sent me a file. It wasn't damning, not in the criminal sense, but it was revealing. Turns out Brad had job-hopped more than anyone in my family realized. He'd bounced between startups, advisory roles, and vague consulting gigs that never seemed to last more than 6 months. He'd failed upward, thanks to charm and connections. The fintech company he currently worked for, he wasn't in upper management. He was in sales, not strategy, not analytics, just sales, which isn't inherently shady, but it made the things he'd said at dinner sound a whole lot more hollow. More importantly, he had a history of bad investments. Real estate, crypto, a few e-commerce ventures that never made it past launch. He wasn't broke, but he wasn't the high-powered executive he pretended to be either. That explained a lot. I filed that info away for later. Step 2. Allies. I wasn't planning to go nuclear. Not yet, but I wanted options. So I called up Ava. Ava was my ex. Well, sort of. We dated casually during the early startup stream years, stayed friends after, and she'd always had a sharp sense for people. More importantly, she'd been at that dinner a year ago, back when Brielle brought her previous boyfriend to test the waters. Ava saw the same patterns I did. The performative charm, the fragile ego. She'd even predicted that relationship wouldn't last, and she was right. When I explained what happened with Brad, she didn't hesitate. I'm in, she said. Whatever you need. You might regret that, I said. I won't, she replied. Besides, I owe your sister for that passive-aggressive meltdown she pulled on me over brunch. Fair enough. We met at a coffee shop later that week to game things out. So what's the plan? She asked, sipping her iced latte. Expose him at the altar? Dramatic speech? Hidden camera? I laughed. Nothing that flashy. Yet. I want to see how deep this goes. I think he's using my sister. Maybe for money. Maybe for clout. I don't know. But something's off. Ava nodded. You think she knows? She's too wrapped up in the idea of winning to notice. And your mom? I smirked. She'll ignore anything that threatens the aesthetic. Ava leaned forward. Then let's give them exactly what they want. A perfect, peaceful wedding. With you front and center. I paused. You think I should go? I think you should RSVP, yes, she said. And while you're smiling for the cameras, we start laying the groundwork. Quietly. Surgically. If Brad's hiding something, we'll find it. And if he's not, well, we'll be polite. But if he is... She let the sentence hang. I nodded. Okay, I said. Let's play. I RSVP'd that night. Attending, +1. No one texted me to acknowledge it. But I knew they saw it. The next few weeks were all about prep. I reconnected with people, talked to mutual acquaintances, slid into the background of Brad's digital world, and started observing. Ava helped me scrub through his social media and identify patterns. Weird inconsistencies in timelines. Travel dates that didn't add up. Comments from friends that hinted at side ventures no one had heard of. Then, one night, Ava messaged me. Found something. I clicked the link she sent. It was a forum thread. A niche finance board buried beneath layers of SEO fog. And in it, Brad. Posting under a pseudonym, but not cleverly enough. He was shilling some kind of crypto-based investing tool. Half-baked, full of buzzwords, and clearly not legal. The thread was full of red flags, promises of guaranteed returns, aggressive tactics, and a few posts from burned users claiming they never got their money back. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was definitely smoke. And smoke meant fire. I sent the thread to Ethan. 2 days later, he confirmed it. Brad had quietly registered a shell company 6 months ago. He'd been funneling money into it from personal accounts, and possibly from friends and family. Probably promising them a big return on a non-existent product. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protection. My sister was walking into a marriage with a man who might be scamming people out of their savings, and she had no idea. My parents were throwing a wedding that could be followed by lawsuits, debt collectors, or worse. And no one had the spine to see it but me. So I made a choice. I wouldn't stop the wedding. Not yet. But I would be ready. Because the day they asked me to smile for the cameras, I'd be smiling with everything in place. The day of the wedding arrived like the final act of a play everyone had rehearsed for but didn't quite understand. The venue was exactly what I expected, tastefully extravagant. White orchids wrapped around archways. Gold-trimmed invitations handed to guests by teenage cousins in stiff suits. A jazz trio played softly near the garden entrance as people milled around with flutes of champagne. Their conversations as shallow as the decorative koi pond near the buffet table. I pulled up in a matte charcoal rental, sleek, understated, professional. Ava stepped out beside me, wearing a deep green dress that made at least 3 of my mother's friends freeze mid-sentence. She looped her arm through mine and whispered, "You ready?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked across the garden, where Brad was shaking hands and flashing his practice smile, where my mother was giving last-minute directions to the wedding planner like a general coordinating a battlefront, where Brielle, stunning in a lace ivory gown, flawless makeup, that signature pageant smile, stood in the middle of it all like a porcelain doll no one dared to touch. Then I nodded. "Yeah, let's finish this." The ceremony was scheduled to start at 4 p.m., right as the sun dipped low enough to make everything look golden in photos. Everyone was dressed to impress, and for the most part, they succeeded. I recognized some faces, old neighbors, family friends, a few extended relatives who only ever showed up for free food and gossip fodder. I kept my distance during the pre-ceremony mingling, nursing a glass of water while watching Brad. He was in full politician mode, charming, laughing, boasting just enough to make people feel special without revealing anything of substance. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was the groom of the century. But I knew better. So did Ava. She nudged me around 3:30. "He's still working the room. You sure we wait until after?" "Yes," I said. "Let the illusion complete itself." We took our seats near the front, second row behind the immediate family. My mom spotted me and gave a brittle smile. Dad nodded stiffly. Brielle didn't look at me once as she walked down the aisle, hand clutched around a bouquet, eyes laser-focused on the altar. I noticed the tightness in her jaw. Not nerves, restraint. Brad, to his credit, looked every bit the charming groom. Clean-cut tucks, subtle cufflinks, that ever-present confidence. The ceremony was short, mostly fluff, a few tears from my aunt, some overly long personal vows that sounded suspiciously like they were AI-generated. Then came the reception. That was the real performance. Tables set with custom place cards, a choreographed first dance, the kind of menu that name-dropped the farm where the chickens were raised. My mom gave a toast about love, perseverance, and building a future together. My dad followed up with a slightly awkward but heartfelt speech about welcoming Brad into the family. I waited. I watched. And then, just as dessert was being served, when the wine had settled in and the guests were loose and smiling, I stood. "May I say a few words?" I asked, tapping a spoon against my glass. The room turned. The MC hesitated, glanced at my mom, who looked frozen in place. Brad smiled tightly. "Of course, man. Go ahead." I stepped up to the mic. "Thanks," I said. "I'll keep this short. I just wanted to say how happy I am for my sister. Brielle, you look beautiful. I may not say it enough, but you've always been the strongest person I know." She blinked, caught off guard, then nodded slowly, unsure of where this was going. I turned to Brad. "And Brad, I have to admit, I wasn't sure about you at first. But over the past few weeks, I've done some homework. Dug into your background, your investments, your side projects. It's enlightening." The room shifted. Laughter died. Heads tilted. Brad stiffened. "What are you?" I held up a hand. "It's okay. I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm just here to tell the truth." I pulled out my phone, connected it to the projector the venue had set up for the photo slideshow. The screen flickered, and a web browser appeared. I opened a PDF titled Investor Communication Records, Credence Coin, 2021 to 2023. Then another file, screenshots of Brad's forum posts under his pseudonym. Next, a short video clip, a recorded Zoom pitch where Brad promised guaranteed returns to a group of unsuspecting investors. His face, his voice, gasps, silence. I let it play for 20 seconds before pausing it. "Brad has been running a low-level Ponzi scheme for the past 2 years, I said calmly. "It's not big enough to hit headlines, but it's enough to ruin people. Friends, family, anyone who bought into the fantasy." People turned. Faces twisted. My uncle whispered something to my dad, who turned sheet white. Brielle stood, clutching her bouquet like a weapon. "Tyler, what is this?" "It's what I tried to tell you," I said, softer now. "He's not who he says he is. I wanted to warn you sooner, but I needed proof." Brad moved toward me. "You little." I said, holding up another paper. "I've already submitted this to the SEC. This is just a courtesy." His face drained of color. But you know what's really sad? I continued, facing the crowd again. It's not just the fraud. It's that no one in this family wanted to believe I could be right, that I could have value beyond being the quiet one. I was told to stop making the family look bad, to be polite, to let things go. I looked at my mother. Her hands trembled around her champagne glass. But today, I chose not to be quiet. Today, I chose truth over comfort. And I think you all needed to see it. I stepped back from the mic. Brad was frozen. Brielle looked like someone had ripped the ground from beneath her. The wedding planner hovered at the edge of the room, pale and twitching. Then came the fallout. My mom stood up. Tyler, we need to talk. I'm done talking, I said. You only listen when it's convenient. Tyler, wait, Brielle said, her voice cracking. Why now? I turned to her. Because you deserve better, even if you couldn't see it. Then I walked out. Ava followed, heels clicking beside me. We didn't speak until we reached the car. She finally asked, do you feel better? I took a long breath. The air was cooler out here. Quieter. I feel free. We drove off. Later, I heard Brad was detained for questioning that same week. The SEC had apparently been circling for months. My documentation just gave them the final piece. Brielle annulled the marriage in under a month. My parents went radio silent for a while, but eventually, a card arrived in the mail. No note. Just a card. Blank inside. I tossed it. Some endings don't need closure. Some endings are just clean, like the click of a door finally locking behind you. And sometimes, silence is the loudest victory of all.